Chapter 315. Taken away. Ding Jincheng secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Now, as long as he took this child away and changed his household register, he would be able to live up to Mulan's entrustment. However, just as he was about to take Bian Yuanzi's hand, someone rushed out from the other side. Ding Jincheng, how dare you! Everyone suddenly turned around and saw Madame Hu running over with disheveled hair. As soon as she came over, she pulled Ding Jincheng back. After pulling him out of old Gus' house, she slapped him hard. You're crazy. You actually want to bring this little bastard back. You can't even raise yourself. Why are you being a kind person and raising him? You're really crazy, crazy, crazy. Let me tell you, if you dare to bring him back, I'll beat him to death. B0X. Calm. Ding Jincheng's expression changed drastically. Mother, what are you doing? Let go. Yuanji is living too hard a life here. I promised Mulan to take good care of him. Don't cause trouble. You promised what? That little bastard was assigned to the old Gu family by the county magistrate. How dare you disobey the county magistrate's order? Do you want to die? Go back and don't come to the Gu village again or I'll break your legs. Madame Hu was about to go crazy from anger. She thought that he had taken a fancy to that little B*TCH and ran over here. She didn't expect him to adopt the little bastard for that Bien Mulan who was infertile. She couldn't tell that her son was a devoted person. No wonder he didn't even like Miss Jiang. Bien Mulan, that B*TCH, still wanted to seduce her son's soul even after she died. When old Gu saw the sudden change in the situation, they were a little shocked. At this moment, they finally reacted and hurriedly went to stop her. Sister-in-law Hu, wait a moment. What's wrong with you? You came and went as you pleased. Do you think we're monkeys? It was Madame Jia who spoke. She reached out and blocked Madame Hu. Madame Hu was taller and stronger than her. She reached out and pushed her aside. Screw you. Tell that to the county magistrate if you dare. If the county magistrate says that he wants us to raise that bastard, he'll take him away without hesitation. Madame Jia immediately choked. The others present were also stunned. It was one thing for the Ding family to take Bian Yuanji away voluntarily, but the Gu family couldn't force them. Madame Hu snorted and pulled Ding Jincheng away. The latter was so anxious that he was sweating profusely. Why did his mother come all of a sudden? Mother, I'm not leaving. I want to raise Yuanji. Mulan sent me a dream last night and asked me to take good care of Yuanji. I can't. Shut up. I knew you were thinking about that little B*TC. Why did she visit you in a dream? Do you think I'm easy to deceive? Madame Hu shouted outside. Old Ding, why are you still standing there? Hurry up and pull this embarrassing thing home. Madame Hu had pulled Mr. Ding over with her. However, when they arrived at the village entrance, Madame Hu heard that Ding Jincheng wanted to bring the child home, so she ran over quickly. At this moment, Madame Hu called out to Father Ding. Father Ding was a burly and strong man. No matter how much Ding Jincheng didn't want to leave, he was pulled away. The others looked at each other. Gu Gang lowered his head and quietly asked MDM Shen, what should we do now? MDM Shen was also a little confused. She glanced at a corner without a trace and said in a low voice, let's wait and see. The most important part of taking Bian Yuanji away was Ding Jincheng. Now that he was gone, how could they continue? The Gu family was especially furious. When they saw Bian Yuanji, they glared at him fiercely. If not for the fact that the onlookers were still around, Madame Zhao would have gone forward to hit him. Chapter 316. Unprofessional. However, when she passed by him, Madame Zhao still snorted. There's no need to eat tonight. Bian Yuanji slightly lowered his head. He knew that every time his brother-in-law came, he would have no dinner. Hence, he did not say a word and just stood there motionless with his head lowered. This time, even Gu Chuanzong was a little angry. He had made a fool of himself for nothing, so when he walked to his side he said, you don't have to eat tomorrow. You're just causing trouble for the family. Bian Yuanji didn't want to cry, but he couldn't control himself. B0X. Calm. It was fine for Madame Zhao to scold him. Her mother said that she was not his biological grandmother, but his grandfather was different. Why didn't he treat him as his grandson? The onlookers gradually dispersed. Watching Bian Yuanji standing alone at the gate of the courtyard, they all let out a sigh. Actually, so what if Ding Jincheng took him away? It would be strange if Madame Hu, that shrew, treated him well. He was afraid that his life would be worse than living in the Gu family. After all, the Gu family were his relatives. Gradually, no one was left at the entrance of old Gus' house, except for Bian Yuanji. Although it was already spring, his clothes were still very thin and cold. Suddenly, a person stood in front of him. He was tall and big, as if he was blocking the wind in front of him. Bien Yuanji raised his reddened eyes and a white steamed bun appeared in front of him. He was stunned for a moment before he heard the man in front of him say, "Eat. I'll warm you up. Hold on for another day." After saying that, he stuffed the steamed bun into his arms and strode away. Bien Yuanji was stunned. The white steamed bun was even bigger and whiter than the one the man gave him yesterday. It looked delicious. He couldn't help but take a big bite. Delicious. Wiping his tears, Bien Yuanji turned around and ate the white steamed bun in big mouthfuls. Then he wiped his mouth and smiled. That was great. A steamed bun could last him until tomorrow. These 2 days he always met good people who gave him steamed buns to eat. Xiao Qingyuan, who was standing far away, saw the relaxed smile on his face. He then turned around and left Gu village in large strides. Gu Yundong was still in the carriage. As it was a little far away, she did not see Madame Hu and Father Ding, who had arrived at Gu village from the other side to take Ding Jincheng away. It was only when Xiao Qingyuan came over and told her the process that she frowned fiercely. Go and Zhu, who were standing outside the carriage, also kicked the tree trunk at the side angrily. Why did that woman come out to cause trouble? Miss, what should we do next? Why don't we trick Madame Hu out and let Ding Jincheng finish the matter before letting her go back? How can we do that? We still have to get the child's household register out. It won't be a short time. Gu Yundong also shook her head. After Madame Hu finds out about what happened today, she will definitely stay by Ding Jincheng's side all day long. We won't be able to deceive her. Then what do we do? Gu Yundong thought for a moment and tapped her fingers lightly on the windowsill. After a while she raised her eyebrows. Got it? What is it? Go and Zhu hurriedly approached. Gu Yundong smiled. I'm a professional in acting. Madame Hu did not believe that Ding Jincheng dreamed of her cousin? Then let her see her in person. Let's go to town first and buy some things we need. This time she couldn't use the space. The town was close and the carriage arrived not long after. Gu Yundong bought a lot of miscellaneous items. Then she parked the carriage beside an inconspicuous small mountain ditch by the roadside of Shangbei village. Then she asked Xiao Qingyuan, Go and Pig to get off while she fiddled with the items on the carriage for a long time. Chapter 317. Wetting her pants. After a long time, Gu Yundong drew the curtain. Unexpectedly, when they showed their faces, Go and Zhu took a few steps back and shouted, "Ghost!" Gu Yundong glared at them. Who are you calling? Her glare made the two of them shiver in fear. Xiao Qingyuan was still very calm. He went forward and sized her up. I can't see your original appearance at all. B0X. Come, it's fine. Anyway, ghosts are the same. Madame Hu won't be able to recognize if I'm my cousin or not. Her hair was down and her face was pale. Blood flowed from the corners of her eyes and nostrils, and there were heavy dark circles around her eyes. Coupled with her bright red lips, anyone who saw her would be frightened to death. How could they recognize her? If Madame Hu really had the guts, Gu Yundong would admire her. Gu Yundong had already looked at himself in the mirror in the carriage and expressed his satisfaction. Only then did she look at Go and Zhu. The two of them slowly leaned against each other, wanting to hug each other for warmth. It was true. When Lady Gu looked at him, they felt as if their souls were about to leave their bodies. Gu Yundong glanced at them. It's your turn. Our turn? What are we going to do? Gu Yundong took out a set of things from the carriage. You'll pretend to be the black and white ghosts. No, they wanted to stay away from her. Now she looked terrifying even during the day. They even had to be by her side at night. They were so scared that they peed their pants. Gu Yundong did not care about them. She made a tall hat to increase their height and make them oppressing. Coupled with the long tongue and dark circles under their eyes, they looked good. After dressing up, the group went straight to Shangbei village. When it was dark, they got out of the carriage and went straight to the Ding family. Go and Zhu had adapted to Gu Yundong's attire and found it interesting. Xiao Qingyuan stood in the courtyard to keep watch. Gu Yundong went to Madame Hu and Father Ding's room and stood by the bed with Go and Zhu, who were acting as the black and white ghosts. She reached out and patted Madame Hu's face. Madame Hu frowned and waved her hand. She turned around and continued sleeping. Gu Yundong frowned and asked Go to wake her up. However, Madame Hu was sleeping like a dead pig. No matter how they shouted or patted, she couldn't wake up from the deep sleep. Zhu waved his hand. Let me do it. He went up and pulled Madame Hu's hairs out, 2 at a time. Gu Yundong was speechless. What if you make her bald? Fortunately, this method worked. Madame Hu gasped in pain and rubbed her eyes. Unexpectedly, when she opened her eyes, 3 terrifying faces suddenly appeared in front of her. Ah! Madame Hu screamed and quickly crawled back, pressing down on Father Ding's finger. It was so painful that he suddenly woke up too. Gu Yundong shushed her. Don't scream. Madame Hu instantly felt like she was being strangled. She stared at the three people in front of her with wide eyes and trembling hands. Mr. Ding Tet Father Ding was so frightened that his face turned pale and he could not say a word. Gu Yundong could not help but sniffle. Why did it smell like urine? She glanced at Madame Hu and wanted to leave, but she held her breath and stayed. Mother? She called out faintly. Madame Hu shivered again. You, who are you? I don't know you. Boo-hoo, why don't you know me? Milan. I died so tragically. Moo Milan TTTTT? Why are you looking for me? You're dead but I didn't kill you. Boo-hoo, let me go. Chapter 318. This is how people die. Father Ding, who was standing at the side, probably felt that he was a man. At least he mustered up a little courage and said fearfully, Yes, Mulan. Back then, you were the one who said that you would save your share of rations for your brother to eat. That's why you starved to death. We only said a few words to you and didn't force you. Gu Yundong was stunned. So there were such twists and turns. It was obvious what kind of state Bien Mulan was in to make such a decision back then. The Ding couple had been complaining about her because she had been married for 4 years without getting pregnant and had to take another child with her on the way to escape. It was obvious how unpleasant the couple's words were. Intellectually, Gu Yundong knew that this was Bien Mulan's choice. But as Bien Mulan's cousin, she really wanted to strangle the two people in front of her. Go tugged at her from behind. Gu Yundong then continued, Yes, I was the one who voluntarily saved the rations for my younger brother. But what did I say before I died? I asked you to take good care of Yuanji for me. You agreed. Did you send my younger brother, whom I exchanged my life for, to the old Gu family to be abused? B0X. The Ding couple was speechless. What could they say? They did agree back then, but wasn't Bien Mulan going to die at that time? Could they let her die with her eyes wide open? But neither of them dared to say it now, especially when Gu Yundong's tears of blood started to flow down slowly. The King of Hell said that my wish in this world had not been fulfilled. My obsession was too deep and I could not be reincarnated. He asked me to come to the human realm to do my last thing. In the end, when I came here, I realized that you guys actually treated Yuanji like this. My poor brother, his life is so bitter. She suddenly cried. Immediately after, a bowl that Madame Hu had placed by the windowsill suddenly fell to the ground and shattered. Madame Hu and Father Ding's faces turned pale. The two of them hugged each other tightly. With a bang, a small stool at the side fell over. Bam! The closet door opened by itself. Go moved his fingers behind his back and quietly retracted the fishing lines that were tied to these things. But Madame Hu was already frightened. Mulan, we didn't do it on purpose. Boo-hoo, it was the county magistrate who made the decision. It had nothing to do with us. Gu Yundong's voice continued to sound ethereal. I don't care. He can't stay in the Gu family. He can't stay in the Gu family. He can't stay in the Gu family. All right. We won't let him stay in old Gus' house. We'll bring him back tomorrow morning. Really, don't come looking for us. Gu Yundong slowly looked at her and suddenly smiled. The moment her blood-red lips parted, she was so frightening that her hair stood on end. Even Go and Zhu, who were standing beside her, had to restrain themselves with all their might to prevent their legs from moving outwards. That's what you said, he. The husband and wife nodded repeatedly. We promised to bring him out. You go. Just go. Satisfied, Gu Yundong slowly turned around. Madame Hu was about to heave a sigh of relief when she suddenly turned around and continued to smile at her. By the way, there's something I forgot to say. What's the matter? Madame Hu was trembling with fear. She only hoped that this ghost would finish speaking and leave quickly. She didn't even dare to look up at her face. It turned out that people were like this after they died. Chapter 319. Picking someone up. Gu Yundong smiled again and opened her bloody mouth. Before Madame Hu almost fainted, she said, My younger brother's name is Bien Yunji, not little bastard. If I find out that you call him that next time, he'll come and take you away with me. Madame Hu nodded quickly. Gu Yundong's face suddenly bled from all 7 orifices. She opened her mouth and giggled. Even her teeth were covered in blood. Madame Hu had just quietly looked up when her eyes rolled back in fright and she fainted. Mr. Ding was stunned for a moment. Then he closed his eyes and fainted. The corners of Gu Yundong's mouth twitched. She gave Go and Zhu a look, and the 3 of them left silently and quickly. B0X. Calm Father Ding only opened one eye quietly when he could not feel any movement. There was no one in the room. The door was open and only the wind was blowing in. He immediately went limp. His back was drenched in sweat, and he shivered violently when the wind blew. After a long time, he pushed Madame Hu away in disdain and got out of bed trembling. He walked to the door and planned to close it. Unexpectedly, he saw his son lying unconscious on the ground in the central room. She was shocked and thought that Bien Mulan had killed him. He hurriedly went forward to take a look and heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, his son had just fainted. Father Ding quickly woke Ding Jincheng up and asked him what was going on. Ding Jincheng didn't know either. He rubbed his head and said with a frown, "I just heard Mother's loud cry and quickly came over to take a look. As soon as I walked to the central room, I was knocked out." Father Ding trembled and quickly told him what had happened. Ding Jincheng didn't quite believe it, but when he returned to his parents' room and saw the wet sheets on the bed, they were clearly frightened. The two of them quickly went forward and woke Madame Hu up. Madame Hu was still in shock. She grabbed Ding Jincheng's hand and said, "You must bring little Bien Yuanji back. You can't let him stay in the Gu family." "No." Ding Jincheng nodded repeatedly. None of them dared to sleep that night. Because Madame Hu's bed was smelly and messy, in addition to the broken bowls and fallen stools on the ground, and the open wardrobe door, everything indicated the terrifying scene that had just happened. Hence, the three of them went to Ding Jincheng's room and waited until dawn, shivering. Then they changed their clothes and rushed to Gu village. The people of Gu village were about to go out to work when they saw the three members of the Ding family rushing over. What was going on? Was yesterday's incident not over yet? Some people who liked to join in the fun and were not important followed behind. When they saw that they were indeed going to Old Gus' house, they immediately became excited. Someone also went to inform Gu Gang. Not long after, the entrance of Old Gus' house was filled with people. When Gu Chuanzong came out and saw them, his expression immediately turned ugly. "What are you doing here?" "Grandpa, we're here to pick Yuanji up." Ding Jincheng took a step forward, his attitude exceptionally friendly and respectful. "Who's your grandpa?" Gu Chuanzong's face darkened. "What? Do you want to take Yuanji away again? Yesterday you refused no matter what. Is there no end to your family's drama?" "That's right." Madame Zhao followed them out. "What do you take my Gu family for? Do you think you can say whatever you want? Get lost." Madame Hu was furious and wanted to pounce on Madame Zhao and scratch her face. Chapter 320, 5 Taels of Silver and He's Yours. However, she could not do that. She even had to squeeze out a smile and apologize. "Uncle, Aunt, don't be angry. We weren't clear-headed yesterday, right? We went back and thought about it for the entire night. We felt that we had let Mulan down. Yuanji was entrusted to us by Mulan. We can't just leave him in the old Gu family. We feel guilty." The members of the Gu family acted as if they had heard a joke, especially Madame Jia. She leaned against the door and laughed hysterically. "Sister-in-law Hu, why are you acting like this every day? I don't think you feel guilty. Yesterday you said that you didn't want Yuanji. Today you came over to ask for him again. What if you say that you don't want him tomorrow? Who can stand you making a fuss like this?" "That's right. Our Gu family is very busy. We don't have time to mess around with you," Gu Dai said loudly. The three members of the Ding family did not look good. They secretly despised him in their hearts. "Busy? You, Gu Dai, are the laziest sloth in this village." Madame Hu suppressed the anger in her heart and said with a smile, "No, no. I promise that after we take Yuanji away this time, we won't send him back." "Who would believe you?" Madame Hu was not someone who could be trusted. B0X. Khan, the third son of the Gu family, Gu Dahu, stroked his chin and suddenly said, "Sister-in-law Hu's change today is too strange. Is your family plotting something? Are you going to sell Yuanji?" Madame Chang, the third daughter-in-law, asked softly. Bien Yuanji, who had just walked out of the courtyard, was stunned. His small body shook violently and he barely stood against the wall. Madame Jia's eyes lit up when she heard that. She rushed to Madame Hu and said, "Sister-in-law Hu, third sister-in-law is right? You want to sell Yuanji? Let me tell you that won't do. Yuanji has met the county magistrate. Can you bear the responsibility if you sell him?" "I'm not selling him." "Who would believe you?" Madame Jia snorted coldly. "Then why are your words yesterday and today completely different? I told you I felt guilty when I went back and thought about it. Who are you trying to fool? It's fine if you want to take Yuanji away. Give us some silver. We've helped you raise him for so long. You'll have to pay for his food, clothes, and accommodation. 5 taels, take him away. Madame Jia glanced at Gu Chuanzong. Seeing that he did not say anything, she thought that he had no objections. 5 taels of silver was not a small amount. At least for now, the Ding family could only take out this much. Bian Yuanji also looked at Gu Chuanzong. After a while, he finally walked to Gu Chuanzong's side. Grandpa, are you really? Gu Chuanzong frowned and sighed. Yuanji, it's not that I don't want to raise you, but you heard it yourself. It's your sister who entrusted you to the Ding family. If you leave with the Ding family, your sister will rest in peace. Your uncle and aunt have taken good care of you recently. It's only right for the Ding family to give them some money. Bian Yuanzi's heart turned cold as he let go of Gu Chuanzong's sleeve. I should have known. Forget it. It doesn't matter. Madame, who was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She glared at Madame Jia and said, 5 taels of silver. Why don't you rob me? Are you giving it to me or not? If you don't give it, Yuanji won't be able to leave with you. Madame, who gritted her teeth. This be asterisk tis. Jia Meizi, don't force me. If you force me, I will say anything. Madame Jia raised her eyebrows. Oh, you're threatening me? Tell me, let's see what you have to say. Madame, who was furious. He'll tell them about the lousy, bad and vicious things you did. Chapter 321. How was Madame Yang injured? What did I do? I Jia Meizi do things openly and honorably. Don't slander me. Madame, who had never seen such a shameless person. You do things openly and honorably? Have you forgotten about Gu Dajiang's wife and sister-in-law? Do you want me to tell you? Madame Jia's expression changed, but the other's curiosity was piqued. Sister-in-law who? What's wrong with Gu Dajiang's wife? Isn't she a fool? Tell us, what did Jia Meizi do? Jia Meizi panicked. She took 2 steps forward and wanted to shut Madame Hu's mouth. However, Madame Chang took a step forward and said, my second sister-in-law has always done things with a clear conscience. Sister-in-law who? Don't spout nonsense here. You're slandering my second sister-in-law and even bringing up my first sister-in-law. You have to give us these 5 taels of silver today. Otherwise, don't even think about taking Bian Yuanji away. Huh? A clear conscience? Madame, who was so angry that she laughed. She pointed at Madame Jia and said, she, Jia Meizi, has a vicious heart. Back then, she was the one who smashed Gu Dajiang's wife by the river and pushed her into the water. I saw it with my own eyes. It was real. If not for that, would Gu Dajiang's wife have become stupid? As soon as she said this, there was silence. B0XO. Calm. Everyone looked at Madame Jia and Madame Hu. Back then, didn't Madame Yang fall into the river? Was she pushed down? This. Madame Jia screamed and pounced forward. She immediately started fighting with Madame Hu. You're spouting feces and talking nonsense. They'll tear your mouth apart for slandering me. She was ruthless, and Madame Hu was not to be outdone. She was much stronger than Madame Jia. After a while, she rode on her and slapped her a few times. Am slandering you? I saw it with my own eyes. I even saw you took away the stone that hit her head and found a place to bury it. Do you want me to take everyone and dig out that stone for you to see? I didn't. You're talking nonsense. I didn't. The 2 of them fought more and more fiercely. Madame Zhao was so angry that she scolded, what are you doing? How dare you hit someone at the entrance of my Gu family? Second brother, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and pull her away. Third sister-in-law, are you stupid? Why aren't you helping? Oh. Madame Chang went over, but she didn't dare to get close. She tugged at them twice to show that she was trying. Then she saw Madame Hu wave a hand over and fall to the ground. Gu Daha helped her back. Gu Dai wanted to help, but Father Ding was still there. Gu Gang could not stand it anymore and shouted, enough, stop fighting. As he spoke, he pointed at the onlookers and said, all of you, go up and separate them. Only then did the people from Gu village take action. One of them pulled Madame Hu and another pulled Madame Jia. Gu Gang snorted. Gu Dajiang's family is gone. What's the use of saying this now? Gu Chuanzong, do you want to give Bian Yuanji to the Ding family or not? If you do, you can just accept 1 tael of silver. If you don't, you can raise him yourself and give him betrothal gifts in the future. When Gu Chuanzong saw that things had come to this, he quickly nodded. Yes. Gu Gang looked at Father Ding again. What about you guys? The Ding family could afford 1 tael of silver, but Madame Hu was unwilling. However, when she thought of Bian Mulan who came to look for her in the middle of the night, she could only nod. Let's give it to them. They're like a group of beggars. After giving them the money, Ding Jincheng carried out Bian Yuanji, who had become numb and didn't speak anymore. Then he said to the Gu family, Let's move his household register now. Chapter 322, Finally done? Why are you in such a hurry? Well, go tomorrow. Gu Chuanzong was unhappy. MDM Shen tugged at Gu Gang's sleeve and said softly, let's quickly finish this matter so that there won't be any complications. Gu Gang thought about it and agreed. Madam who was capricious, so he could not give her a chance to go back on her word. Hence, he glared at Gu Chuanzong and said, why tomorrow? It's still early. You can come back after you're done. As the village chief he had to make a trip. Therefore he walked up to Gu Chuanzong and said, give me the silver. B0XO. Calm. Gu Chuanzong was stunned. Gu Gang glared at him. What? Don't you need to bribe to move the household register? Dr. Gu TTTTTTT could only give him the silver. After giving it to him he suddenly realized that the Ding family should pay for it. However, Gu Gang could not be bothered with him. He got someone to get an ox cart and sat on it. Dr. Gu could only get into the car unwillingly. Ding Jincheng asked Father Ding to bring Madam Hu back to the village first. He could do this. Madam Hu wanted to follow him, worried that he would be at a disadvantage alone. However, she had just fought with Madame Jia. Her face was bruised, her clothes were torn, and her right foot was twisted. Hence, she could only remind Ding Jincheng to be more careful. Only then did Father Ding carry her back. The three of them staggered out of Gu village on the ox cart. Not long after they left the village they saw a carriage parked by the roadside. There was a young man sitting on the shaft of the carriage. They did not know him. Only Ding Jincheng remained silent with his head lowered and Bian Yuanji in his arms. Gu Gang and Gu Chuanzong had a discussion curiously. Not long after the ox cart left, Xiao Qingyuan walked over from afar. Aju lifted the curtain and jumped up. That's enough. As long as they settle the household registration. Let's go. Gu Yundong relaxed slightly and turned to look out of the window. He instantly felt refreshed. Therefore, she didn't notice Xiao Qingyuan's hesitant expression. However, before Xiao Qingyuan left, he asked Dago to stay behind and instructed him to do something. The carriage did not move very fast. After all, the speed of the ox cart was limited so they could only move slowly. After entering the county city, Gu Yundong went to the inn to see Madame Yang. Madame Yang didn't see her the entire night and was a little anxious. If Xiao Qingyuan hadn't come back to report, she wouldn't have been able to sleep at night. Now that she saw her, she quickly pulled her back. Dong Dong, I missed you so much. I miss you too. Have you eaten? Madame Yang nodded, and Gu Yundong accompanied her to talk while waiting for news from Ding Jincheng. Ding Jincheng had already entered the county office. The person in charge of household registration was the secretary, so he could be considered to know Gu Chuanzong. Now that Ding Jincheng had come personally and explained the situation, he did not make things difficult for him. However, Ding Jincheng didn't want to transfer Bian Yuanji to the Ding family. Instead, he wanted to give Bian Yuanji an independent house. Yuanji is the only son of the Bian family. He's going to carry on the family name. If he moves to the Ding family, what if things get messed up in the future? Gu Chuanzong pursed his lips. Things get messed up? Wasn't he just afraid that the child would take away his assets when he grew up? However, this was no longer his business. The three of them completed their household registration and walked back. However, Ding Jincheng said that he would buy clothes for Bian Yuanji instead of going with them. In the end, after Gu Gang and the other man left, Ding Jincheng led the child straight to the inn. They didn't even look at the clothing store when they passed by. Bian Yuanji thought that he had brought him here to sell him. Especially when he saw Ding Jincheng bringing him to knock on a door of the room in the inn and saw a rich lady standing inside, this thought reached its peak. Chapter 323. Your cousin Yundong. Only Gu Yundong and Madame Yang were in the room. Xiao Qingyuan and the rest had returned to their rooms. Ding Jincheng let out a sigh of relief after bringing him over. Yundong, I've brought him over. This is his household register. I'll leave it here. After saying that, he placed the thing on the table and turned to leave. Seeing this, Bian Yuanji subconsciously took 2 steps forward. However, he soon stopped and watched the door close in front of him. It was as if all the light had been blocked outside. He stood there alone, not knowing what to do. B0XO. Calm, a gentle voice came from behind him. Are you Yuanji? Bian Yuanji's petite body trembled slightly as he slowly turned around. He then took 2 steps back and pressed his back against the wall, watching her carefully. Naturally, he did not recognize Gu Yundong. Gu Yundong was dressed very differently from before. Even if she was wearing the same clothes as before, he would not recognize his cousin. After all, the last time they met was in the first month of last year when he went to visit his uncle. He did not stay for long. Most of the time he played with Gu Yunxiu, who was about the same age and did not speak much to Gu Yundong. When Gu Yundong saw his frightened expression, she cursed the Gu family in his heart. She took 2 steps closer to him. Bian Yuanji wanted to hide into the wall. You don't remember me? Then do you remember your eldest uncle? Gu Yundong stopped in front of him and squatted down to ask him. Bian Yuanji was stunned. Eldest uncle? Of course he remembered that eldest uncle doted on him a lot. Before his sister died, she had said that if he returned to his hometown and didn't see his parents, he should look for his eldest uncle or 4th uncle. However, when he arrived at the Gu family, he couldn't find his eldest uncle or 4th uncle. He only saw his 2nd and 3rd uncles who had never treated him well. Gu Yundong tried her best to make the smile on her face look kind and gentle. I'm your eldest uncle's daughter, cousin Yundong. Do you remember? Bian Yuanzi's body was not as tense as before. He just widened his eyes in surprise. Gu Yundong asked again, do you still remember Ashu? I remember that you guys played together last year and you said that he was your best friend. I'm Ashu's sister. Ashu? Eldest uncle? Bian Yuanji finally opened his small mouth and muttered softly. He looked at Gu Yundong, who was showing him kindness, and vaguely felt that he had seen her before. Cousin? Yes, I'm your cousin. Gu Yundong smiled. My current home is very far away. It's called Yongfu village. I came back here to look for your eldest uncle, but I couldn't find him. I met Ding Jincheng and found out that you had been sent to the Gu family and had suffered a lot. That's why I asked him to bring you out. Yunji, are you willing to go home with me? Go home? Bian Yuanzi's mind was in a mess. It turned out that she didn't want to buy him as a slave. Only then did Gu Yundong reach out and hold his tiny shoulders. She nodded and said, yes, I'll bring you back to your eldest uncle's house. Yunshu and Yunka are both there. Cousin and your eldest aunt are also there. Bian Yuanji came back to his senses and nodded quickly. I am willing to. I can work, cook, wash clothes and feed pigs. I'll go to eldest uncle's house. Is that okay? Although he was unfamiliar with his cousin in front of him, he still remembered Ashu. Even if he was asked to go over and continue working, it did not matter to him. Chapter 324. It feels like a dream. Ashu was over there. He was his best friend. When he was sad he could talk to Ashu. Ashu did not bully and laugh at him like the other cousins of the Gu family. Gu Yundong's heart ached when she heard what he said. She tightened her grip on Gu Yundong's shoulders and slowly released her grip when she felt the thin and weak bones under her palm. You don't have to work. When you come to eldest uncle's house, you just have to take care of yourself and help do what you can when we're busy. You're our family, not a servant. Family? It seemed like a long time since he had a family by his side. B0XO. Calm blinking his eyes, Bian Yuanji was confused and in disbelief. He felt like he was dreaming. Gu Yundong patted his head. Ashu must be very happy to see you. She stood up and held his hand as she walked towards Madame Yang, who had been standing at the side. Do you remember eldest aunt? Bian Yuanji raised his head. He had an impression of Madame Yang. Firstly, it was because Madame Yang's situation was special and he easily remembered her. Secondly, it was because she was an adult and he had to greet the elders when he went to his uncle's house. He spoke more to her. When he entered just now, he was afraid and did not dare to look around. Only now did he notice her. Madame Yang also squatted down and hugged his small body. She patted his back gently and said with a smile, let's go home. They'll bring you home. Don't be afraid. Dong Dong is here. Don't be afraid. Wah! Bian Yuanji suddenly burst into tears. Perhaps it was because Madame Yang was an elder, and her smile was reassuring. Her embrace was warm, and her voice also made his uneasy emotions relax. Immediately, all his discomfort and grievances surged and he could not help but cry until he was hoarse. Madame Yang was shocked. She looked up at Gu Yundong helplessly. Gu Yundong blinked at her. Madame Yang patted Bian Yuanzi's back gently. Don't cry, don't cry. Be a good boy, don't cry. Bian Yuanji had been suffering for too long. He had been treated like livestock by his relatives in the Gu family. Now that he was in the arms of his aunt, he finally understood what it meant to have a family member. Not all blood relations could be called family. He was crying so hard that he was out of breath. Seeing that he was about to faint, Gu Yundong went forward and pulled him out of Madame Yang's arms. She wiped his face with a handkerchief. Stop crying. It's all in the past. Are you hungry? Let's eat first. You can take a shower and sleep. We'll talk after you rest, okay? Gu Yundong's temper was much better now, especially when facing children. She was especially patient. Yes, this was all thanks to Yunfu, Yunka, and Madame Yang. After all, these were 3 babies. Now, with the addition of Bian Yuanji, Gu Yundong suddenly felt that she had the potential to be a kindergarten teacher. She suddenly shivered and got up to open the cover on the table. The food had been prepared long ago, and now it was warm enough to eat. Bian Yuanji was indeed very hungry. He had only eaten a steamed bun last night. At the sight of the delicious food, he couldn't help but swallow hard. However, he was probably tortured by the Gu family for too long. He still asked carefully, "Can I really eat it?" Gu Yundong smiled at him. "You didn't eat much in the past. Now you can only eat soft porridge and some light and refreshing dishes. You can slowly eat something better later." Okay. That was good too. This seemed to be plain porridge. Even old Master Gu could not eat such porridge. Chapter 325. Dog hasn't returned. Gu Yundong saw that although he nodded, he did not dare to do anything, so she scooped a bowl for him and placed it in front of him. "Eat." She also scooped a bowl for Madame Yang. Madame Yang was very happy. She took a sip happily and said to Bian Yunji, "Eat quickly. After you're done, I'll teach you to solve the puzzle. The puzzle is very fun. After you finish it, you'll see Ashu and Kiki." Bian Yunji was curious. What was a puzzle? He couldn't help but take a sip. Then he felt his entire body warm up. It was delicious. More delicious than anything he had ever eaten. Updated on B0X and Zeroville. Calm, he wanted to cry again. Bian Yunji hurriedly wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and continued eating with a smile. Gu Yundong got up and went out, asking the waiter to prepare a bucket of hot water. She had bought 2 sets of clean clothes and some necessities for Bian Yunji. Unexpectedly, when she opened the door, she saw Xiao Qingyuan standing not far away looking at the door. Gu Yundong walked over. "What's wrong?" "I heard crying just now." That was why he was worried. Gu Yundong's expression darkened. "It's all the Gu family's fault. It's fine. He's crying everything out." Dr. Gu was a selfish person. He didn't treat Bian Yunji as his grandson at all. This child suffered worse than her family did back then. At least Gu Yundong and her siblings had Gu Dajiang to protect them. Although Gu Dajiang was usually so busy that he could not take care of them, the Gu family was really afraid of angering him. But Bian Yunji, who didn't have his parents by his side and didn't have Gu Dajiang and 4th Uncle Gu protecting him, was almost tormented to death. They wouldn't do this even to strangers, right? "Although I didn't find father this time, it's a good thing to bring Yuanji back." Older Aunt Gu had a total of 3 children. The eldest, Bian Molan, didn't make it through the escape. The second child was a son, but unfortunately he didn't grow up. When he was 4 years old, he died because of a fever. Older Aunt Gu had been traumatized for a long time. It was only 8 years ago that she was pregnant with Bian Yuanji. He was older Aunt Gus' only bloodline. As they were talking, the waiter came over with the cold water that was to be mixed with the hot water. Only then did Gu Yundong open the door and let them in. The 2 people in the room were almost full. Bian Yuanzi's stomach had shrunk due to hunger, so he was already full after eating a little bit. Although he still wanted to eat, he touched his stomach and obediently put down the spoon. It was difficult to bathe after eating. Gu Yundong showed him the new clothes and asked him to choose one. Bian Yuanji widened his eyes in astonishment as he looked at the brand new clothes. It took him a long time to touch them. The fabric was very comfortable and seemed to be very warm. It was completely incomparable to the rough clothes he was wearing. He looked up. "Are you going to let me wear them?" "Of course. Don't you like the clothes?" Bian Yuanji hurriedly nodded his head. "Yes, I do. Take a bath and change into it later." Bian Yuanji couldn't help but burst out into laughter. After eating, he even had new clothes to wear. It was as if he was dreaming. He was so silly that Gu Yundong could not help but rub his head. Gu Yundong waited for the waiter to bring them hot water before she went out to call Ashu, who happened to pass by, to help Bian Yuanji bathe. Although Madame Yang was an elder, Yuanji was 7 years old after all. At this era, it was important for men and women to sit at different tables when they reached 7 years old. However, the conditions of rural families were limited, so even if they had grown up, they might still live in the same room. Madame Yang sat obediently outside the screen, completing the puzzle. From time to time, she would say a few words to Yuanji to prevent him from feeling nervous and uneasy in the same room as the unfamiliar Ashu. Gu Yundong went to look for Xiao Qingyuan. She was curious why Ago was not back yet. Chapter 326. Itchy hands unexpectedly just as she knocked on his door. Xiao Qingyuan happened to be coming out. He seemed to be looking for her for something. What is it? Are you done over there? Xiao Qingyuan asked as he let her in and closed the door. Gu Yundong nodded. I felt that you had something to tell me just now. What's wrong? Also, what did you ask Ago to do? Why isn't he back yet? Xiao Qingyuan poured her a cup of tea and sat opposite her. There's indeed something. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Calm as he spoke, he pushed the cup in front of her. He realized that she would always drink water when she was angry. Gu Yundong looked at him in surprise. This person. She took the cup of water silently. Go ahead. When the Ding family went to ask for the child today, they quarreled with the Gu family. At that time, Madame Hu said that she saw with her own eyes that your mother was hit on the head and pushed into the river by Gu Da's wife back then. That's how she became like this. Gu Yundong suddenly stood up. What did you say? I don't know if Madame Hu said it in her anger or if it's true. I let Ago stay in Gu village and keep an eye on old Gus family to see if it's true. If he can't find out, we can only ask Madame Hu. Gu Yundong's face was ashen. It was not an accident that her mother fell into the water and became like this. Was Jia Meizi the one who smashed and pushed her? Her mother had already suffered enough in the Gu family. She was low-key and hard-working, but Jia Meizi actually wanted her life. She suddenly lowered her head and took 2 sips of water. Xiao Qingyuan immediately poured more water for her. Don't worry. We'll talk about it when Dog comes back. Gu Yundong slowly sat down, her gaze cold. Back then, when Madame Yang became like this, she had suffered so many insults and abuses. There were always some malicious fellows in the village who would deliberately trick her when they saw her, giving her something she shouldn't eat or making her do something she shouldn't do. In the beginning, Madame Yang was really miserable. At that time, Gu Yundong was still young and had to take care of her younger sister, who was born half a year ago and had no one to take care of her. However, those bastards from the Gu family deliberately made Madame Yang go out to wash clothes and shoot pig grass. It was only when Gu Dajiang suddenly returned and saw Madame Yang being forced to kneel on the ground and kowtow to someone with his own eyes that he got angry and smashed a stone at that person's head. He had injured the guy and Gu Gang had found an excuse to beat him up. At that time, Gu Dajiang's gaze was fierce, and he looked like he wanted to perish together with him. This made Gu Gang a little afraid. He was worried that he would really anger Gu Dajiang, so he could only ask him to compensate the victim and let him go. After that day, Gu Dajiang didn't go to the county restaurant to continue being an accountant. He stayed at the Gu residence and didn't work. He had to take care of Madame Yang and the children. Dr. Gu had no choice but to give in and promise to let Madame Yang stay at home and work in the future so that she would not be bullied by the villagers. Only then did Gu Dajiang return to Xingxing restaurant. He had no choice but to go back. Madame Yang still needed money to treat her illness. He had to earn money. Gu Yundong had always thought that Madame Yang's fall into the water was an accident. After all, someone in the village had said that they had personally seen her fall into the water. Then Madame Yang was rescued immediately and did not drown. Unexpectedly, the culprit was Jia Meizi. Very good. Her hands were itchy now. Calm down first. Ago should be back soon. We'll ask about the situation then. All right. I'll wait for Go to come back. She said word by word, almost gnashing her teeth. Chapter 327, How dare you kill her? At this moment, Ago was in the Gu family's small storeroom. Although it was called a small storeroom, it was actually filled with various hoes, farm tools, dustpans and baskets. There was also a medium-sized wooden board in the room, which was Bian Yuanzi's bed. Ago sat on the wooden board and looked at the storeroom that was leaking in all directions. He had a better understanding of the inhumaneness of the Gu family. He was waiting for Dr. Gu to come back. It would take some time for Dr. Gu to go to the county to move the household register. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Calm as for the rest of the Gu family, they seemed to be staying in their rooms. No one came out and no one knew what they were talking about. It was not until Gu Chuanzong entered the courtyard with a dark expression that Madame Zhao came out to welcome him. Gu Chuanzong did not stop walking. He said to her, "Go and call everyone over." With that he entered the room. Madame Zhao muttered, but she still went to call everybody. When Ago heard the commotion outside, he quickly stood up from the wooden board and quietly crawled to the window under the main house to squat. The main house was the best place in the entire Gu family. Behind the window was a small courtyard. It had been cultivated and planted as a vegetable field. When Ago came out, he also took out the wooden board from the storeroom. At this moment he put the wooden board up and leaned against the wall, squatting down. The main room was filled with people one after another. The second and third branches, together with old Gu and Madame Zhao, filled up the not-so-big main room. Gu Chuanzong raised his head and glanced at them. His gaze finally landed on Madame Zhao. Was that woman from the Ding family telling the truth? Madame Zhao wanted to play dumb. Father, what are you talking about? Are you serious? How can I believe that shrew's words? If I can't believe it, why did you go up and hit her? Dr. Gu slammed the table. Do you think everyone is blind? No one will believe you if you say that you're not guilty. Madame Jia immediately lowered her head and muttered softly. However, Gu Dai said, Father, how long has it been? Why are you still bringing it up? Besides, eldest brother's entire family is dead. No one is here to settle scores now. The third son, Gu Dahu, glanced at him. He lowered his head and said softly, You can't say that. That woman was shouting in front of the entire village. Even if eldest brother's family is no longer around, we can't pretend that what second sister-in-law did never happened. What if the villagers point fingers at us in the future? Can our Gu family's daughters get married in the future? Madame Zhao originally did not think that it was a big deal. In her opinion, even if Madame Yang died, it would be her life. However, when she heard her third son's words, she was instantly furious. She stood up and rushed towards Madame Jia, hitting her in the face. You troublemaker, how can you be so capable? You even dare to throw a stone at someone. You're too vicious. It's not enough that you harmed yourself, but you also dare to implicate us. Gu Dai glared at his third brother and went up to stop Madame Zhao. Mother, stop. What's done is done. What do you want? Madame Zhao was accidentally pushed by him and took 2 steps back. Madame Chang happened to support her. Mother, be careful. She lowered her voice. Don't anger second sister-in-law. She was unhappy when Sienna was sold. When Madame Zhao heard this, she suddenly shivered. What did she mean? Could it be that Madame Jia dared to kill her? Chapter 328. Old Gu was beaten up. Madame Jia suddenly raised her head and glared fiercely at Madame Chang. Suddenly she rushed over, grabbed Madame Chang's hair, and gave her 2 tight slaps. Madame Chang was caught off guard and fell. Gu Dahu reacted quickly and went forward to pull Madame Jia up and push her to the side. Second sister-in-law, what are you doing? What? You hit eldest sister-in-law and now you want to hit your third sister-in-law. It seems that none of your sisters-in-law will have a good ending, right? What kind of sister-in-law is she? Madame Jia sneered. She couldn't care less and pointed at Madame Chang. Why did I hit eldest sister-in-law? You should ask your wife properly. If she hadn't said in front of me that eldest sister-in-law secretly seduced my Dai, would I have gone to settle scores with her? Updated on B0X and 0ville. Madame Chang trembled in Gu Dahu's arms. She sobbed and retorted, Second sister-in-law, don't talk nonsense. When did I say that? Eldest sister-in-law had a man. Why would she seduce second uncle? You still dare to deny it, you still dare to deny it. Madame Jia wanted to rush up and hit her again. You said that eldest uncle is not mother's biological son, and father doesn't treat him well, so eldest sister-in-law's life is the most difficult. So in order to live a good life, eldest sister-in-law wants to secretly hook up with our Dai. Did you say that? Is that right? Madame Chang shook her head vigorously. I didn't. I really didn't say anything. You slut, I knew that you two were bad people. When eldest uncle was around, you guys abused them. Now that they're not around, you're here to deal with us, right? When Sienna was sold, it was you, slut, who sowed discord. Alright, your daughter was saved, but you want my daughter to go out and suffer as a servant. I've long wanted to beat you to death. Gu Dahu said angrily, Second sister-in-law, are you crazy? You're biting people everywhere. You two are not good people. Ever since you came back, you've been using Sienna as an excuse and don't do anything. Father and mother feel guilty and let you lie at home like corpses every day. Now you've done something wrong and let the entire village know that our family has a vicious woman. How dare you blame my wife here? As soon as Gu Dahu got involved, Gu Dai naturally had to protect Madame Jia. The two families were arguing fiercely. The children on both sides were also secretly competing. The entire main house was like a market, revealing all their shortcomings. In the past, with Gu Dajiang around, the second and third sons had the same parents. Naturally, they were on the same side and didn't get along with Gu Dajiang. Now that Gu Dajiang's family was gone, only the two families lived under the same roof. However, Gu Dai and his wife were lazy. When they were working, they would slack off if they could. The third branch had long lost their patience. Now that they had finally found Gu Da's fault, they naturally had to make use of it. If they could poke someone's wound, they would poke it. It was best to take the opportunity to split up the family and let the two lazy people from the second branch fend for themselves. Madame Zhao was stunned. So her two daughters-in-law had actually done so much behind her back? She looked at old Gu, who also had a sullen face. His two sons, whom he doted on the most, had actually hated each other to this extent. His head hurt from the noise. He closed his eyes for a long time before slamming the table. "Shut up, all of you." No one listened to him. The two sides were in a heated argument and even started fighting. It was not known who was careless, but one of their fists missed and knocked old Gu, who was walking over angrily, to the ground. Madame Zhao screamed, "Old man." The quarreling in the main room finally stopped. Chapter 329. Bakago, who was under the window, heard what happened and cursed in his heart. He deserved it. Dr. Gu was sent to the bed. Madame Jia immediately said, "I'll go find a doctor." After saying that, she ran out. Her positive attitude made Ah Go feel that something was wrong. After hesitating for a moment, Ah Go followed her silently. Madame Jia was not on the way to call a doctor. She secretly ran to the foot of a mountain and looked around. When she did not see anyone, she quickly squatted under a tree and dug. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Not long after, a stone was dug out. Ah Go quickly guessed that this stone should be the one that hit Madame Yang's head. Madame Jia hugged the stone and looked around. Ah Go hurriedly hid his body. She quickly filled in the hole she had dug and stepped on it forcefully. Then she took the stone and left. She originally wanted to throw it into the river, but now that the riverside was filled with women washing clothes, she could only find a random place to throw it away. Anyway, Madame Hu only said that she saw the place where the stone was buried. Now that there were no more stones in that place, what else could she say? Only then did Madame Jia hurriedly run to find a doctor. Ah Go waited for her to leave before he went over to pick up the stone. The stone was not big and it had been a few years. There were no traces left on it. However, Ah Go still tore off a piece of his sleeve and carefully wrapped the stone. Seeing that it was getting late, he hurriedly returned to Jianghu County. Gu Yundong was sitting in the room and listening to Madame Yang humming a tune. Bian Yuanji had just fallen asleep. He didn't seem to be sleeping well. His brows were tightly knitted. It wasn't until Madame Yang hummed older Aunt Gus's tune that he slowly fell asleep. Gu Yundong tilted her head and looked at Madame Yang's confused eyes. If she returned to normal in the future and recalled the humiliation she had suffered in the past, would she be very sad and painful? However, she could not let her remain foolish forever. This was unfair to Madame Yang. When she had the chance, she would ask Dr. Song if Madame Yang could forget this unhappy memory after she was cured. Just as she was engrossed in her thoughts, there was a soft knock on the door. Gu Yundong stood up and said to Madame Yang, "Mother, Yuanji is asleep. You should rest too." "I'm not tired." Madame Yang actually enjoyed this state. Deep down, she still wanted to take care of others. Previously, on the way to escape, she had been feeding and dressing the two children with Gu Yunka on her back. This seemed to have become her bodhisattva memory. It was just that she had been out with Gu Yundong during this period of time and did not have Ashu and Kiki by her side to take care of. Dong Dong did everything by herself, so Madame Yang was a little perturbed. Sometimes, there was a panic in the depths of her heart that she was not needed. Now that Bian Yuanji was here, she was much calmer. Actually, Gu Yundong had long noticed her state, but she could not think of a solution for the time being. After all, she really did not need her mother to dress and wash her face. Pursing her lips, she opened the door and went out. Gu Yundong guessed that Ah Go had returned. Sure enough, when she went to Xiao Qingyuan's room, she saw Ah Go sitting on a stool with a serious expression. In front of him was a stone covered in mud. Seeing Gu Yundong enter, Ah Go immediately stood up. "Mississippi." Gu Yundong's gaze fell on the stone and he quickly guessed its origin. Ah Go looked at her worriedly. He glanced at Xiao Qingyuan, who was also silent. No one knew what he was thinking. Gu Yundong had already walked to the stool and sat down. "Speak." Chapter 330. Let them have a taste of blood. Ah Go nodded and immediately repeated what he had heard under the window of old Gus's house. His memory was extremely good, and he could almost recall everything that everyone had said. Gu Yundong listened quietly, her gaze fixed on the rock. After Ah Go finished speaking, she even poured him a glass of water. Ah Go felt that the latter's mood was a little strange now. He had clearly said it with righteous indignation, but the lady was so calm that there were no ripples. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Calm only Xiao Qingyuan knew that this was the calm before the storm. Sure enough, after she took the teacup from Xiao Qingyuan and drank the water, the teacup was crushed by her. Ago was speechless. Was Miss Gu that strong? He tried to exert his strength and even the veins on his face popped out, but the teacup was still intact. Ago silently put the teacup back and asked Gu Yundong, "Miss, what should we do next? We must teach old Gus family a lesson." More than a lesson. She wanted them to have a taste of blood. "Tell us, well, do it," Xiao Qingyuan said. At the side, Ago nodded desperately. Gu Yundong thought of what old Gus family had done. Old Gu cared about his face and was selfish and hypocritical. Madame Zhao was unreasonable, ruthless and unreasonable. The second branch was lazy, vicious and enjoyed life. The third branch was a couple who specialized in sowing discord in the dark. Coincidentally, she could deal with them all at once. Gu Yundong began to roll up her sleeves, eager to make a move. "How about this?" Gu Yundong asked the others to come in and explain many things in detail. Mao and the others nodded as they listened. In the end, their eyes lit up. After Gu Yundong finished planning everything, she let Mao and the rest go to bed while she prepared to return to her room. Behind her, Xiao Qingyuan suddenly asked, "What about me? Aren't you busy with Gu Gang's family? Do you need me to make a plan for you?" Actually, there was no need. Xiao Qingyuan knew that she wanted to deal with old Gus family. As the patriarch, Gu Gang might cause trouble, so he just had to stir up trouble in Gu Gang's family. But, yes, he said seriously and sincerely. Gu Yundong's mouth could not help but twitch. She sat back down. Xiao Qingyuan poured her a glass of water and sat up straight, looking like he was all ears. But the next moment he saw Gu Yundong frowning as if she was thinking hard. His heart ached instantly. He immediately stood up. "Go back and rest. I can settle it." "Didn't you just say?" "I suddenly had an idea." Gu Yundong was speechless. "I don't believe you. You had a flash of inspiration?" "Yes, I just thought of it." Xiao Qingyuan nodded affirmatively. His expression was exceptionally serious and he spoke as if it was true. Gu Yundong could not help but want to laugh. Why was this man so cute? She was originally filled with frustration today, but when she saw him like this, she suddenly felt relieved. After dealing with old Gus family, she felt that she should have a good chat with Xiao Qingyuan. Gu Yundong returned to her room and she reserved another room beside. In any case, there was really no business in this inn. Gu Yundong and her gang's arrival had increased its popularity. The next morning, Go and Zhu set off. However, before they left, they took the stone wrapped in cloth with them. Not long after, Shu and Mao also left the inn. At this moment, Gu Yundong carried the food into the room and asked Madame Yang and Bian Yuanji to eat. Bian Yuanji walked to the table and his eyes widened when he saw Xiao Qingyuan enter. Chapter 331:1 Can do anything. Wasn't this the person who gave him the white steamed bun? Bian Yuanji blinked. So, did his cousin send this guy over? What about the one from the day before? Was it also his cousin's doing? His eyes suddenly curved into crescents and he smiled happily. Xiao Qingyuan noticed his gaze and couldn't help but look at him. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Bian Yuanji hurriedly lowered his head and ate obediently. However, from the corner of his eye, he saw Xiao Qingyuan scooping porridge for Gu Yundong. He could not help but think to himself that this was his cousin-in-law. She looked better than his ex-brother-in-law. She would definitely be happy in the future. Definitely. After everyone at the table finished eating in silence, Xiao Qingyuan said, "Someone will come over later." Gu Yundong raised her eyebrows. Xiao Qingyuan looked at the time and walked to the windowsill. He lowered his eyes and looked at the people coming and going below. After a while, a familiar-looking woman walked over and raised her head to look over. When she saw Xiao Qingyuan, she quickly lowered her head. This person was Gu Gang's concubine, Madame Shen. Shen was holding a basket in her hand and there was a woman beside her. She did not notice Shen's abnormality and was bargaining with the vegetable seller by the roadside. Seeing that the discussion was intense, Shen suddenly said in a low voice, "I'm a little unwell. They'll go to the inn opposite to borrow the outhouse. If you've bought the vegetables, wait for me under the willow by the river." The woman frowned. She wanted to say that she was lazy and had a lot of feces and urine, but she still forced a smile. "All right, go ahead. But you have to give me the money for the groceries." Shen gave her the money and the basket. She hurriedly turned around and entered the inn. The woman pursed her lips, but she was a little happier when she saw the money in her hand. She worked even harder to argue with the vegetable seller. If she could get the price lower by 1 copper coin, she would be able to keep 1 more copper coin. Shen entered the inn and looked at the second floor. When she saw Xiao Qingyuan, she hurriedly came up. After entering, she saw Gu Yundong, Madame Yang, and Bian Yuanji. Bian Yuanji also saw her. Of course, he recognized this person. In the past, when Madame Shen pitied him, she would occasionally give him some food. Bian Yuanji had a good impression of her and would not call her a vixen behind her back like the other children in the village did. Shen was slightly surprised to see Bian Yuanji, who had changed completely. She smiled and nodded at him before looking at Gu Yundong. "You must be Miss Gu." "Miss Shen," Gu Yundong said with a smile. When Shen heard her address, she was still in a daze. Ever since she became Gu Gang's concubine, she had heard many vicious and unpleasant titles. The best was Madame Shen. It had been a long time since anyone called her Miss Shen. Shen was a little moved. She secretly took a deep breath and said, "I don't have much time. I'll make it short. Let's go to the room next door." Gu Yundong asked Madame Yang to teach Bian Yuanji to solve the puzzle, and the three of them went to Xiao Qingyuan's room. Originally, Xiao Qingyuan could have gone to the Gu village to look for Shen. However, Gu Gang's wife kept a close eye on her and was especially keen to find trouble with her. Just 2 days ago, when Xiao Qingyuan went to look for her, he was almost seen by that woman. Shen took the opportunity to go out. She even brought Gu Gang's daughter-in-law, Yu, with her. Since ancient times, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law had always been difficult to get along. Madame Yu and her mother-in-law had always been at odds. Now that she had Madame Shen as her second mother-in-law, wouldn't she be close to her so that they could deal with the mother-in-law together? After the three of them sat down, Shen asked, "What do you want me to do?" "What can you do?" Shen sneered. "As long as Gu Gang receives retribution, I can do anything." Chapter 332. Shen's hatred. Shen was indeed saved by Gu Gang's grandson, Gu Wanbao. She was originally a girl from a small town, the only daughter of her parents. Her family background was not bad. When she grew up, her parents wanted to find a son-in-law for her, but the conditions of a live-in son-in-law were not particularly good. After some selection, she was already 17 or 18 years old. Then, the Shen family left Yongning Prefecture because of the famine. Unfortunately, the Shen family's parents were gone. Only Madame Shen was barely alive. She had promised her parents that she would take care of herself and save her life. Therefore, when Gu Wanbao saved her, she was sincerely grateful. Updated on B0X and 0ville. Even though the rest of the Gu family looked at her sloppy appearance with disdain, even though she knew that the Gu family was not a good family, even though after she washed her face, the 3 males of the Gu family looked at her strangely, Madame Shen was already prepared to be a slave. They had saved her life, so it was not too much to be a slave. However, this did not include the fact that Gu Gang had forcibly defiled her when she was completely unwilling. The pain from that day was still unforgettable and heart-wrenching. There were no good people in old Gus' family. None of them were innocent. This included Gu Wanbao and Madame Yu, who had sent her to Gu Gang's bed. She was the woman who had been bargaining with the vegetable seller. Madame Yu was Gu Wanbao's mother, so she didn't like Madame Shen. Not only did Madame Shen have no one to rely on, but even her man had to peek at this woman from time to time. Coupled with the fact that Gu Wanbao was liking her more and more, Madame Yu was a little anxious. Perhaps because she had been the village chief's daughter-in-law for a long time and felt that her family was superior to others, Gu Wanbao had to marry a girl from the county. Therefore, Madame Yu found an opportunity and secretly sent Madame Shen to her father-in-law's bed. This way, Gu Wanbao would not marry this woman, her own man would not dare to look at this woman, and she would be able to disgust her annoying mother-in-law. Everyone would be happy. Only Madame Shen was almost sent to hell. Gu Wanbao, on the other hand, was dissatisfied and wanted to make a fuss. After being threatened and tempted by Gu Gang, he stopped. However, Shen knew that the way Gu Wanbao looked at her was even more unscrupulous and dirty than before, as if she was just an unpresentable thing. Sometimes she even thought of buying a bag of arsenic and poisoning everyone in old Gus' family to death. However, she had promised her parents that she would live well. Hence, she was waiting for an opportunity. Now this opportunity had arrived. Madame Shen looked at Xiao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong with a hint of madness in her eyes. "I just want to keep my life. I'll do whatever you want me to do." "Then let Gu Gang and Gu Wanbao fight," Xiao Qingyuan said. Shen was stunned. Let Gu Gang and Gu Wanbao go against each other? Gu Wanbao was actually a coward. When facing Gu Gang he could only retreat. If they were to fight he would have to be forced into a corner. Xiao Qingyuan said, although Gu Wanbao is timid, he grew up under Gu Gang's dominance. There are some things that he doesn't dare to say. Didn't Gu Gang find a marriage for him? Let Gu Gang ruin this marriage. Gu Wanbao. Before he could finish he was interrupted by MDM Shen. There's no need to say anything else. I have an idea. Xiao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong looked at each other. Seeing the determination in MDM Shen's eyes, they did not say anything else. If you need help you can look for Ah Shu and the others. You've seen them before. Alright, I'll go back first. MDM Shen stood up and turned to leave the inn. Gu Yundong looked at her back and frowned slightly. Why do I feel that her thoughts are a little dangerous? Xiao Qingyuan had this feeling in his heart too. Chapter 333. Something happened to the old Gu family. MDM Shen returned to MDM Yes' side and smiled again. Madam, you complained impatiently. What took you so long? I've been standing here for a while. I had no choice. My stomach suddenly felt uncomfortable. I really don't know if I ate something wrong. MDM Shen sighed and frowned slightly. She looked a little haggard. MDM Yu immediately exclaimed, the food this morning was made by mother-in-law. Could it be that she wanted to say something but hesitated as if she was concerned. Seeing MDM Shen's expression suddenly darken, she immediately felt happy. She loved watching these two mother-in-laws fight. Because Madame Shen was not feeling well, the two of them sped up. After hurriedly buying things they took the ox cart back. In the end, just as they got off the ox cart at the village, they suddenly saw the doctor in town running in hurriedly. The person leading the way was actually Gu Dai. Beside them, the women in the village were discussing mysteriously. Madame Yu was a person who liked to join in the fun. She quickly ran over and asked around. The woman immediately said, something happened to Gu Da's wife. This morning, when she carried her clothes to the river to wash them, she was suddenly knocked on the head and fell into the river. Ah! Madame Yu was surprised. Is that person still alive? She's alive. Someone downstream saw her fall into the river and quickly saved her. Speaking of which, it's strange. That person only saw Jiameizi fall into the river, but he didn't see anyone push her down. Isn't this situation exactly the same as when Gu Dajiang's wife fell into the river? Do you think Gu Dajiang's wife came back to take revenge? The person who spoke at the end lowered his voice, carrying a strange aura. When others heard this they could not help but shiver. Don't spout nonsense. If Gu Dajiang's wife wants revenge, why didn't she come over earlier? She didn't know who hit her head. If it weren't for the Ding family's wife yesterday, who would know? That's true. Why don't we go to old Gus' house to take a look and ask if that's true? The people gathered here were all gossipy. They were very curious. As soon as someone said this, although they were also a little afraid that Madame Yang's ghost would not disperse, there were many people and it was broad daylight, so there was nothing to be afraid of. MDM Yu was also curious and wanted to take a look, so she went over and said to MDM Shen, if you're not feeling well, go back quickly. Bring everything home first. I'll take a look at old Gus' house too. I'll tell you when I come back. After saying that, she stuffed the basket in her hand into Madame Shen's hand. Alright, I'll go back first. Before MDM Shen could finish speaking, MDM Yu impatiently followed the others towards old Gus' house. MDM Shen pursed her lips and returned to the Gu residence. At this moment, the Gu residence was exceptionally deserted. The courtyard door was not locked, but there seemed to be no one around. MDM Shen put down her things and looked around. She realized that only Gu Wanbao was sleeping on the bed. The others might have gone to old Gus' house? MDM Shen's eyes flickered slightly. She walked into the courtyard and deliberately made a loud sound. Bang! It immediately spread into the room. Gu Wanbao jolted and sat up on the bed. Frowning, he rubbed his eyes and looked out sleepily. Just as he was about to curse, he suddenly heard a low cry. Chapter 334. You're my darling. Gu Wanbao was stunned. He immediately got off the bed and looked in the direction of the voice. He saw MDM Shen sitting in the central room with her head lowered, wiping her tears. That low sobbing voice was actually indescribably melodious and pleasing to the ear. Gu Wanbao could not help but feel an itch in his heart. He looked around and saw that there was no one around, so he quietly approached her. Why are you crying? MDM Shen seemed to be shocked. She suddenly looked up with tears in the corners of her eyes. Why are you home? She quickly wiped her tears and turned her back to him. I just came back from work and I'm tired. I'm resting in my room. In fact, he had been fooling around outside for the entire night and had only returned in the morning. After all, he was going to get married soon. At that time, it would be inconvenient for him to do anything with a wife at home. Of course, he had to go out and have a good time before he got married. He asked again, "Why are you crying?" Shen shook her head. "It has nothing to do with you." "How so? We're family now. Tell me quickly who bullied you." Shen sneered. "What family? Who's your family? You're getting married soon. When the time comes, your family will be another woman. What am I?" As she spoke, she started crying again. She was even sadder than before. Gu Wanbao was stunned for a moment. He carefully thought about what she meant and his eyes lit up. He smiled casually. "You can't bear to leave me?" Shen did not speak and only lowered her head to hide her tears. Wasn't her silence a tacit agreement? Gu Wanbao's vanity was greatly satisfied. He leaned forward. "Tell me, did you miss me?" Shen seemed to be annoyed by his interrogation. She suddenly turned around and pushed him. "So what if I did? You're going to marry someone else. I'm already your grandmother." Gu Wanbao laughed. "What grandmother? Is there a grandma as young as you? You're my darling. I really cherish you." I can't tell." She looked as if she didn't believe him, but the corners of her mouth curled up uncontrollably. Gu Wanbao looked at her seriously. "Don't be sad. My heart is filled with you. You ignored me a while ago. Were you angry with me? Now that you see that I'm getting married, you're nervous?" "Nervous about what? Why should I care?" "You don't mean what you say." "I'm just—" Before Shen could finish speaking, footsteps came from outside. "I'll hide first." Gu Wanbao quickly turned around and returned to his room. Madame Shen looked at his back and snorted. The next moment, Gu Gang's wife, Madame Wang, strode in. When she saw Madame Shen, she scolded her. "How long have you been here? Don't you have to work? If everyone is waiting for you to cook, won't we starve to death?" Gu Wanbao walked out with sleepy eyes. "Grandma, why are you shouting? You woke me up." Madame Wang's expression changed. She quickly went forward and said, "Wanbao, you're here. I'm sorry I didn't notice. I won't be noisy anymore. Why don't you sleep for a while more?" "I'm already awake. Why should I sleep?" He looked around. "Where are my parents and the others?" "They're all at Gu Chuanzong's house. His family has the most trouble." Madame Wang was originally watching the commotion, but when she saw her daughter-in-law, Madame Yu, go over, she found out that they had returned from the county city and hurriedly ran back to find trouble with Madame Shen. Gu Wanbao's interest was piqued. What happened to that family? It said that they encountered a ghost. It's broad daylight. Where did the ghost come from? Then I'll go take a look too. Gu Wanbao ran out. When he arrived at old Gus' house, he saw that it was indeed surrounded by people. When he finally squeezed in, he heard his grandfather talking. Chapter 335, Scared to Death, Why Doesn't Your Family Ever Stop? Previously, Bian Yuanji attracted a county magistrate. 2 days ago, the Ding family's wife came to cause trouble. Today you said that your wife encountered a ghost. Can't you live a good life? Gu Gang was very impatient. He lectured Gu Chuanzong like a grandson. Gu Wanbao listened with great interest outside. However, he was curious about what Gu Da's wife looked like after she encountered a ghost. Hence, he quietly blended into the crowd and walked towards Gu Da's room. There were a lot of people surrounding Gu Da's room and they couldn't be chased away. Everyone wanted to hear what the doctor had to say. The old doctor only took her pulse slightly and said, "She's fine. She was just shocked. She just needs to rest well." "But doctor, there's a big bump on the back of my wife's head. How can she be fine?" Update on Biomicron X0 VL. Xiomicron M. The old doctor glanced at Gu Day. "You said it's a big bump yourself. It will disappear after a while. What's the hurry?" Gu Day wanted to say something, but the old doctor had already left impatiently. As soon as he left, the others immediately asked, "Da's wife, what happened? Did you see anyone smash your head? Did you really encounter a ghost?" Jianghu, who had already woken up, could not help but shiver. She did not know who hit her on the head, but she knew that she was not by the river when she fainted. When she was at the foot of the mountain, she felt a pain in her head and fainted. However, the women who had saved her just now said that when they saw her, she was standing by the river upstream. They called her a few times, but she did not respond. Instead, she fell straight into the river. And there was no one beside her. She looked as if she had been possessed by a ghost. Without needing anyone to remind her, Jianghu almost immediately thought of Madame Yang. Wasn't it exactly the same when she pushed Madame Yang into the river? But the problem was that when she pushed Madame Yang, she happened to be at the corner of the river. At that time, a big rock blocked her figure. Therefore, no one could see if Madame Yang had fallen accidentally or been pushed down. However, no one had expected someone to be so vicious as to kill someone. Therefore, when Gu Dajiang asked, the women by the river said that she had slipped and fallen into the river and hit her head. As it happened, Madame Yang had become stupid, so she naturally could not defend herself. However, Madame Jia was different. There were no obstacles around the place where she fell into the water. Everyone could clearly see that she was standing alone by the river with her body leaning forward. At that time, a woman called out to her. Then she fell. Jianghu was still afraid when she thought about it. She even felt that Madame Yang might be beside her. The people in the room were still discussing loudly. Gu Dai had a headache from the noise and suddenly roared, "All of you get out. Didn't you hear the doctor say that my wife needs a good rest? Get lost." As he spoke, he asked his eldest son, the 12-year-old Gu Feier, to chase them away. Gu Feier picked up the broom beside him and waved it at the crowd. A group of gossipy women. Do you have nothing better to do? Get out, get out. As he did this, everyone left one after another. However, they were cursing and swearing. Some even said that Jianghu deserved it. This was her retribution. The third branch of the Gu family, Gu Dahu and his wife, also came to visit. The two of them looked at each other and laughed. Now, the two branches had completely fallen out with each other and did not even greet each other. Seeing Jianghu encounter such a thing, the two of them were indescribably happy. Unexpectedly, just as they were about to return to their room, they suddenly heard two voices discussing from the corner of the wall. Chapter 336. Hiding Merit and Feng. Gu Dahu suddenly stopped in his tracks and pulled Madame Chang back. He pressed his lips together and shushed her. Soon, the discussion gradually became clearer. Gu Da's wife must have suffered retribution. Madame Yang must have come back to take revenge on her. Who asked her to be so vicious and evil? Do you think Gu Dai will also suffer retribution? Gu Dai didn't break his sister-in-law's head and push her into the river, right? Otherwise, why was Jianghu the only one who got into trouble today? Hey, you don't know about this, right? Another person said mysteriously. Let me tell you. Gu Dai was drunk some time ago and personally said that on the way to Qingan Prefecture, he knocked his niece's head and even snatched a tael of silver. I heard that his niece was already half dead at that time. Do you think she died because he knocked her? Update on Biomicron X0VL. Xiomicronum, oh? There's such a thing? That's why I wondered if his niece would seek revenge on Gu Dai. The two of them chatted for a while before suddenly getting up and leaving. Gu Dahu stood where he was, deep in thought. On the other hand, Madame Chang hurriedly walked around to look at the two people who were talking. Unfortunately, she could only see the backs of the two men. They were wearing the clothes of ordinary villagers. She did not know who they were. When she returned, she saw Gu Dahu's eyes shining. He pulled her back to the room and whispered, I have an idea. Do you want to hear it? What is it? Second sister-in-law has harmed eldest sister-in-law. Isn't there a retribution now? Then second brother has harmed Yundong. Shouldn't he pay the price too? Madame Chang was stunned. Gu Dahu cackled. Second brother wanted Yundong's life. Of course, he could not take second brother's life, but second brother's silver. The couple lowered their heads and began to discuss in detail. On the other side, Ah Go and Ah Zhu, who had been hiding, covered their mouths and laughed softly. It's about time. Let's go back today. Sure thing. The two of them left Gu village silently. Because of the Gu village was the combination of two villages, the other village had few people and was poor. After they returned from the wilderness, some houses could not be lived in, so some people moved to the empty houses in Gu village. Therefore, there were always strangers coming in and out of this place, so the two of them were not so conspicuous. The two of them returned to Jianghu County and entered the inn. In the end, they only saw Ah Mao waiting for them alone. Ah Mao and Ah Shu woke up early to look at the houses in the county city. After all, they could not leave for the time being, and it was inconvenient to stay in the inn all the time. After looking around, they all moved over, leaving only Ah Mao here to bring them to the place. The new courtyard was a little remote. They wouldn't be staying there for long anyway. Ah Go was a little excited when he went in. After sitting down, he could not wait to tell them what had happened in Gu village. That Jianghu really thought that she was possessed by a ghost. She was so frightened that her face turned pale. I'm dying of laughter. Actually, Ah Go had indeed knocked her out and moved her to the river with Ah Zhu. They originally wanted to move her to the place where Madame Yang had fallen into the water. There were large rocks there that could block people, and the same place looked more realistic. However, there was someone there. After Ago and Aju discussed, they found another place. At that time, Jiamazi was tied to a rope, and the other end of the rope was pulled by Aju, who hid in a tree. Chapter 337. It must be Gu Yundong. Ago went into the water and stuck his head out. He grabbed Madame Jia's feet and held them in place. From afar, it was like Madame Jia was standing facing the river, her body leaning forward as if she was about to fall. However, they could not see Ago in the water. When they called out to Madame Jia, Ago untied the rope on her body and Madame Jia fell into the river. In order not to kill anyone, Ago even put her head aside. Then he swam to the other side and immediately changed his clothes when he got ashore. Fortunately, the weather was gradually getting warmer. Although it was still a little cold, Ago felt fearless. Even so, Gu Yundong still made him drink a large bowl of ginger tea to get rid of the cold. Update on Biomicron X0 VL. Siomicronim, Gu Dahu and his wife should have fallen for it too. Speaking of this, everyone could not help but feel excited. Mao said, "We should go to Gu village tomorrow." The next day, Shu went to Gu village with the excuse of settling down. They pretended to be dissatisfied with other places and had no choice but to run back to Gu village. On the other hand, Gu Gang became even more smug and arrogant. Shu said that he wanted to walk around the village first. When Gu Gang saw that there was a chance, he immediately brought him along. They walked to the entrance of old Gus' house. Then they heard a commotion coming from inside. "Father, there was a thief in our house. I don't have any money left in my room." The smile on Gu Gang's face suddenly fell and he gritted his teeth in anger. Shu looked inside curiously. Gu Da's loud shout had called the whole family over. When Madame Zhao heard that her house had been robbed, she immediately turned around and returned to her room. She looked at her money bag and heaved a sigh of relief. However, her expression immediately turned ugly. She came out and asked him, "You saved money? How much did you save? Was it your wife who urged you?" "Mother, why are you still talking about this at a time like this? Our house has been robbed." "Madame Zhao, robbed? Then why didn't I lose anything in my room?" "I didn't lose anything in my room either. Even the copper coin that mother gave our bower yesterday is on the table." "It's still there," Madame Chang added. Gu Dai was stunned. What did she mean? Was he the only one who lost money in his room? Gu Da, who suddenly seemed to have thought of something and exclaimed, "Second brother, don't tell me it was also taken by a ghost? It even specially took your silver." "What did you say?" Gu Dai glared at him fiercely. Gu Da, who quickly took a step back. Why is second brother so angry? Could it be that second brother has forgotten that he snatched Yundong's money on the way to escape? "Look, she came back to take revenge on you. Otherwise, while second sister-in-law is still recuperating in her room, who would dare to go in and steal?" When everyone heard this, their expressions instantly changed. It would have been fine if Jiamazi had encountered such a strange thing alone, but now even Gu Dai had encountered it? Well, Gu Dai felt as if his throat was choked and he could not say a word. Shu, who was outside the door, clicked his tongue. A trace of embarrassment flashed across Gu Gang's face. "They're all talking nonsense. There's something wrong with the brains of everyone in old Gus' family." Shu didn't say anything and turned around to go back. When they returned to Gu Gang's house, Gu Gang started to talk about the price again, but Shu did not say a word. The central room was silent for a moment. On the other hand, Mao sauntered out again. When no one was around, he walked to the kitchen. Seeing that Madame Shen was alone, he quickly went in and said, "Miss Shen, my lady asked me to tell you something." Chapter 338. Something happened to old Gu again. Madame Shen looked out. Madame Wang had gone to the toilet and was not back yet. She took a step forward and asked, "What is it?" Mao said, "My lady said that there are many ways to take revenge. If this path doesn't work, we'll find another one. However, it's not worth it to sacrifice yourself for revenge." When Madame Shen heard this, she was stunned. Did that Miss Gu guess something? She pursed her lips and looked up to say something, but Mao had already left. Update on Biomicron X0 VL. Siomicron MMDM. Shen secretly pinched her fingers. Another way? Of course she knew there were other ways, but she didn't want to wait any longer. She would not throw herself in. "Why are you standing at the door? Did you do something wrong? Did you secretly eat something?" Madame Wang's voice suddenly sounded in her ears. Madame Shen was pushed by her and instantly lowered her eyes to hide the disgust in the corners of her eyes. She did not say a word. However, Madame Wang refused to give up. Why are you acting like this again? Alright, there's a piece of meat missing. You must have eaten it secretly. I knew that you're not a good person. I was only gone for a while. Your hands and feet are dirty, right? I was wondering why you spent so much money when you went to the county city to buy things yesterday. Were you the one who kept some of the money? Her cursing continued. Gu Gang finally couldn't help but walk over and slap her. Can you stop? The guests have been scared away. Do you think everyone is as petty and stingy as you? Madame Wang screamed. You hit me again? She pounced on him and scratched him with her nails. MDM Shen silently retreated to a corner and watched them fight to the death. On the other side, Ashu had also returned. However, he told Gu Gang that he had to consider it carefully and would come back another day. The next day, Ago and Aju came over. Then, something happened to old Gus' family again. It was said that when Madame Jia came out of the outhouse in the morning, she saw the youngest son of the third branch take out a stone from Gu Dahu and his wife's room and plan to throw it away. Then, she recognized that it was the stone that she had dug out from the ground and thrown away. Jia Meizi exploded on the spot. She snatched the stone and beat the child until he almost vomited blood. Hence, the two branches started fighting again. Madame Jia insisted that it was Gu Dahu and his wife who had smashed her head, not Madame Yang's ghost at all. Of course, Gu Dahu and his wife did not admit it. They felt that Madame Jia was deliberately slandering them because the second branch had lost money and wanted to extort a sum from them. Old Gu and Madame Jia were in a terrible fix. Not to mention stopping the fight, they were even injured. The villagers were all watching the commotion. Only then did they realize that Madame Chang, who looked soft and weak, actually had extraordinary combat strength. She pressed Madame Jia down and beat her up until she cried like a ghost. On the third day, Ah Mao and Ah Shu came again, so something happened to old Gus' family again. The two branches of old Gus' family wanted to split up, but old Gu refused. Madame Zhao said that they wanted to follow third brother. This was because she knew that her second son and wife were lazy and greedy. Moreover, she had sold Gu Xiener previously. Madame Jia must have a grudge against them. Gu Dai did not want to take care of this couple either, so he agreed readily. However, the condition was that they had to share more of the family assets as compensation for Gu Xiener. Madame Zhao said that she did not have money. When no one was paying attention, Gu Feier secretly ran to the third branch's room to search for silver. He actually found 8 taels of silver. The Gu family was stunned and Madame Zhao was even more dumbfounded. She had only saved 15 taels of silver for so many years. Chapter 339. The end of the old Gu family. Gu Dai leaned over to take a look and realized that one of the pieces of silver looked very familiar. When he took a closer look, he immediately recognized it. Wasn't this his? He remembered that when he went to exchange for copper coins, the silver fragments were in this shape. At that time he even joked that the silver fragment was twisted too uniquely, and the two gaps were a little symmetrical. Gu Dai rushed up on the spot and hit Gu Dahu. He scolded him for being a thief and wanted to send him to the officials. He scolded his brother's wife for being a murderer and trying to murder Madame Jia. The two branches started fighting again. This time even the children were involved. Old Gu shouted at the top of his lungs. No one listened to him at all. Madame Zhao cried even louder. Many things in her house had been smashed. On the fourth day, Ah Go and Ah Zhu came again. Then, something happened to old Gus' family again. The 5th day, the 6th day, the 7th day, on the 8th day old Gus' family's two branches had already reached a point where they could not get along. The villagers seemed to be watching the show every day. Gu Gang wanted to interfere, but he realized that Gu Wanbao had been making things difficult for him recently. The two of them had quarreled several times, and he had even said that he did not want to get married. The rumors had even reached the ears of his future in-laws. Gu Gang was already in a terrible fix over his own family's matters, so how could he have the time to pay attention to old Gus' family's situation? By the time he came back to his senses, something had already happened to old Gus' family. It was said that Jia Meizi had suffered too much during this period of time. It was mainly because they were at a disadvantage every time they fought with the third branch. The third branch's couple were good at secretly scamming people. Others did not expect their martial arts to be so strong. If they fought, the second branch would always lose. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Xiaomicron M. That day, when Jia Meizi saw the eldest daughter of the third branch, anger surged. She thought about how her Xiener's life was still unknown and how she worked like a slave for others. How could the daughter of the third branch enjoy life at home? At that time her eyes were bloodshot. She stuffed the 12-year-old girl's mouth and put her into a sack and brought her to the county city. On the way, someone saw that something was wrong with her and noticed that Madame Chang was looking for someone. They roughly guessed it and told Madame Chang. Madame Chang rushed to the county city in a hurry and happened to see Madame Jiao planning to sell her daughter to a brothel. Her eyes were about to split open as she went up and started fighting. It was true that Madame Jiao could not defeat her, but Madame Chang had to protect her daughter, so she was at a disadvantage. Unexpectedly, Madame Jiao took the opportunity to tear off her clothes and expose most of her body in public. Who were the people in the brothel? They were all despicable men. Madame Chang was stunned and her mind went blank. In the end, it was her daughter who escorted her back. After Madame Chang returned, there was something wrong with her and she was in a daze. The doctor said that her brain had been hurt and was afraid that she would be like this in the future. However, Madame Jiao even said that she was embarrassing and wanted Gu Dahu to divorce Madame Chang. Gu Dahu was so angry that his entire body was trembling. He pushed Madame Jiao and almost made her fall. He rushed into the kitchen, grabbed a knife and ran to the second branch's room. Madame Jiao was trembling in fear. Gu Dahu naturally went to stop her and the knife slashed his wrist. The tendons in Gu Da's hand were broken, and his right hand was completely crippled. However, Gu Dahu did not give up. He steeled his heart and cut off the tendons in Gu Da's left hand. Old Gu's house was covered in blood. When old Gu and Madame Jiao rushed in, they saw Gu Dahu lying in a pool of blood with a scream. Madame Jiao was knocking Gu Dahu away. Then she picked up the knife that he had dropped on the ground and slashed his leg. Old Gu collapsed to the ground. The last thought in his mind was, if I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have sharpened the knife yesterday. Chapter 340. The godlike Gu Yundong. The villagers were shocked by such a huge incident. Madame Chang went crazy. Gu Da's hands were crippled and Gu Dahu broke his leg. Madame Jiao wanted to sink Madame Jiao into the pond. When Gu Gang heard this, he almost fainted. By the time he arrived at the Gu residence, the entire courtyard was filled with tragic cries. The villagers hired 2 doctors, but their medical skills were not very good. They could only stop the bleeding and save their lives. As for curing them, that would be too difficult for the doctors. Gu Gang went to look for old Gu. The latter sat weakly in Gu Dahu's room with his back hunched. It was as if a lot of white hair had grown out of his head in an instant. His vitality had been sucked out of him as if he had aged many years. Madame Jiao was in Gu Da's room. She got someone to grab Madame Jiao and shouted at the top of her lungs, "Get rid of her and sink her into the pond." It was all this scourge's fault. All her fault. If it weren't for her, Madame Chang wouldn't have gone crazy, and third son wouldn't have been so angry that he cut off second brother's tendons. In the end, Madame Jiao even cut off third brother's legs. Their 2 strong laborers, her 2 sons, were ruined. Destroyed. You're a jinx. Since you married into our family has never lived a good life. Well, sink her into the pond. Her screams could be heard clearly by everyone outside, including old Gu and Gu Gang. Update on Biomicron X0 VL. Xiomicron Gu Gang frowned and asked him, "What do you think?" Old Gu wiped his face and looked at his third son on the bed, then at Madame Chang, who was sitting at the head of the bed in a daze. In the end, he thought of his second son, who was also lying down, and sighed heavily. Karma. It's all karma. As he spoke, he got up and bent down to go to the second branch's room. He said to Madame Jiao, whose eyes were still fierce, "Let second daughter-in-law stay." Madame Jiao turned to look at him in disbelief. Old Gu said, "Second brother is already like this. Someone has to take care of him." "I can take care of him. What about third son?" Madame Jiao opened her mouth. Thinking of Madame Chang's appearance, she probably could not rely on her. She could only do it herself. Old Gu continued, "Besides, if you sink her into the pond, who will do all the work in our family? Or are you going to arrange another wife for second brother? But our family spent most of our money on the treatment just now. Besides, look at second son. No one is willing to marry him again." "But," old Gu said in a low voice, "at most you can just torture her in the future. Let this matter go. Don't make a fuss. Our family is already like this, what are you still making a fuss for? Let's not talk about anything else. For the sake of your eldest grandson, you can't sink her into the pond. Otherwise, what if your eldest grandson wants to get married in the future?" After Madame Jiao heard this, she looked at MDM Jiao with a vicious gaze. Madame Jiao was also afraid now. At that time she was just hot-headed. She did not expect things to develop to this extent. Now, as long as they did not let her sink into the pond, she would do anything. Now that things had come to this, old Gus' words made sense. In addition, his eldest grandson was still pleading on the side. Madame Zhao could only give in. However, Madame Zhao's life would be difficult in the future. Therefore, old Gus' family has suffered heavy losses this time. When Ah Go and the others reported the situation to Gu Yundong, they were extremely excited. Miss Gus' foresight was godlike. She was too smart. Look at how she had tormented old Gus' family. Gu Yundong knew that old Gus' family would not have a good ending. After all, she knew the weaknesses of that family too well. They were all selfish. What she cared more about now was, what about Miss Shen? Chapter 341. You adulterous couple. At the mention of the Shen family, Ah Shu and Ah Mao looked at each other. Of course, they already knew how Madame Shen planned to deal with Gu Gang. Although they felt that it was not worth it, there was nothing they could do since Madame Shen insisted on doing so. Ah Shu said, Miss Shen asked me to help her tomorrow. She should be preparing to reel in the net. Gu Yundong nodded. Go there early tomorrow? The next day, Ah Shu went to Gu village again. Recently, Gu Gang had been very frustrated. Gu village was not peaceful because so many things had happened to old Gus' family. Ah Shu, whom he had always thought could extort more money from, always said that he would consider whether or not to settle down here. Every time he thought there was hope, something would happen to old Gus' family. Then Ah Shu would go back. This dragged on day after day. Therefore, Gu Gang really hated old Gus' family to the core. He was considering whether he should chase this useless family out of Gu village. However, he had lost his patience with Ah Shu. This time, when he heard that Ah Shu was coming, he was also disinterested. It was only when Ah Shu's cousin came over and said that Ah Shu wanted to see the homestead that he suddenly came back to his senses. Had this guy made up his mind? Gu Gang immediately tidied himself up and left. Ah Shu was standing not far from his distant cousin's house. He pointed at a place and said that he wanted to buy 1 acre. Gu Gang still stated the previous price, and there was no room for negotiation. Although Ah Shu was unhappy, he still agreed. Unexpectedly, Gu Gang pushed his luck and asked for 5 taels of silver as he had to bribe the officials. When Ah Shu heard this, he exploded and started arguing with him on the spot. He said that Gu Gang was a blood-sucking bug, that he was black-hearted, and his words were very intense. It provoked Gu Gang so much that he almost fainted. He pointed at Ah Shu and told him to get lost. He didn't have to come again. Then he went home angrily. There was no one at home. Gu Gang was so angry that his throat was smoking. He wanted to go to the kitchen to drink water. Unexpectedly, he heard strange rustling sounds. Among them was his concubine Madame Shen's. There was something wrong with that sound. Gu Gang followed the sound and saw that the door to his room was ajar. He could hear laughter coming from inside. He only heard a few words before his anger surged. He suddenly pushed open the door. What greeted his eyes were 2 people in disheveled clothes hugging each other. One of them was Gu Wanbao, his good grandson. The other was Madame Shen, his beloved concubine. What a match made in heaven. Gu Gang pointed at them with a trembling finger. You adulterous couple, you actually did such a thing, you did such a thing. Slowly, even his body began to tremble. He turned around to look for something as if he wanted to beat them to death. Seeing that there was a wooden stick beside the door frame, Gu Gang took it. Madame Shen screamed in fear and hurriedly hid behind Gu Wanbao. She said pitifully and dependently, "What should I do? Wanbao, save me. Hell, kill me. What should I do? I'm so scared." Initially, Gu Wanbao was still a little timid. However, he had been quarreling with Gu Gang recently, so his courage slowly grew. Coupled with Madame Shen's stimulation, he immediately puffed out his chest and stood in front of her. "Who are you calling an adulterous couple? You're clearly the one who's so old and still doesn't know shame. I was the one who saved her in the first place, and I was the one who wanted to marry her. If you hadn't ruined her, we would have been a perfect couple. You old man, you already have my grandmother, yet you still fancy a young lady. She's young enough to be your granddaughter." Chapter 342. Escaped. You. Gu Gang raised his hand that was holding the wooden stick high, but he could not smash it no matter what. He felt that his hand was out of control, and a bad feeling welled up in his heart. Gradually, his pupils enlarged and Gu Gang made a difficult hee-hee sound. He walked towards Gu Wanbao step by step, his eyes bloodshot as if he wanted to say something. However, in Gu Wanba's eyes, it was obvious that he wanted to kill him. However, MDM Shen saw that something was wrong before him. She tugged at Gu Wanba's sleeve. Is he going to beat us to death? Let's run. Gu Wanbao pulled him away. Gu Gang was a little anxious. He moved his other hand and seemed to be able to control it. He immediately grabbed Gu Wanbao, who was walking past him. Gu Wanbao's expression changed. In his panic, he grabbed the scissors in the embroidered basket and stabbed them at him. Bright red blood spurted out, dyeing Gu Wanbao's hands and his clothes red. Gu Gang lowered his head in disbelief and looked at the scissors stuck in his chest. Gu Wanbao was also shocked. He lowered his head and looked at his hands. He had killed someone. He killed his own grandfather. Gu Wanbao suddenly took 2 steps back. He looked at Madame Shen, who also looked at him with wide eyes. You have to pay with your life for killing someone, she said with difficulty. Gu Wanbao's face turned pale. He shook his head. No, I didn't do it on purpose. I don't want to pay with my life. I don't want to die. I don't want. He turned around and ran out in a panic. MDM Shen was still standing on the spot. She looked at Gu Gang, who was panting heavily on the ground, and suddenly laughed. Ah Mao's head appeared at the door and waved at her. Let's go. MDM Shen cleaned up the traces on the bed and followed Ah Mao over the wall, temporarily leaving the Gu residence. At this moment, Gu Wanbao did not expect to bump into Ah Shu and his cousin the moment he ran out of the door. Ah Shu saw the blood on Gu Wanbao's hand at a glance, and so did his cousin. They both looked at him in shock. Gu Wanbao shook his head violently. I didn't. As he spoke, he ran away quickly and disappeared in an instant. Before Ah Shu could say anything, his cousin shouted, Oh no, something must have happened. She ran into the house first and searched around. In the end, she found the person lying on the ground in Gu Gang's main room, covered in blood. Screams instantly resounded throughout the entire Gu family. Not long after, people arrived one after another. MDM Shen also came in with a basket. When she saw that her house was surrounded by people, she asked in surprise, What's wrong? Why are they all gathered at our door? When someone saw her coming over, he immediately said, Oh, you're back. Something happened at your house. Your man was stabbed by his grandson. Blood is everywhere. What? MDM Shen's basket fell to the ground and she ran in without saying anything. Gu Gang's bed was filled with people. Among them, Madame Wang cried the most sadly. Madame Yu, on the other hand, muttered to herself. She looked at Ah Shu's cousin one moment and shouted the next, Impossible. My Wanbao didn't do it. He didn't do it. The cousin took 2 steps back. I'm not the only one who saw it. Ah Shu saw it too. His hands were covered in blood when he ran out. He was in a panic. I think we weren't the only ones who saw him when he ran away. There were others on the way. Why don't you ask? I don't believe it. I don't believe anyone until Wanbao is found. The entire Gu family was filled with a gloomy atmosphere. Only MDM Shen slept soundly. Gu Yundong was quite satisfied with this result. As long as MDM Shen felt that it was fine, she would naturally be fine. About 10 days had passed since the start of her plans for Gu village. The Gu family was finished and so was Gu Gang. Gu Yundong thought that it was time to go back and meet her younger siblings. She was already starting to miss them. Her mother was playing with the puzzle over and over again, almost to the point of erasing the patterns on the puzzle. However, before leaving she still asked Bian Yuanji, We will be leaving here in 2 days. Is there anywhere you want to go? She thought that after leaving this time, they might not have a chance to come back again. She asked him if there was anywhere he wanted to go and would bring him there before they left. Bian Yuanji was stunned. He lowered his head and replied after a while, Yes. Chapter 344. Meeting Madame Hu again. Bian Yuanji wanted to take a look at his home. Ever since he came back from the desert, he stayed in the Ding family for a few days before being sent to the Gu family. Until now, he had never returned to the warm home where his parents and sister used to live. Gu Yundong immediately agreed. She also wanted to take a look. The Bian family was a little far away. After leaving the county city, they had to pass by Gu village and the Ding family's Shangbei village. After passing another village, they arrived at his house. Her eldest uncle Bian Han's parents had passed away a few years ago. His family had never had many children. Bian Yuanzi's only close relative was Bian Han's sister, who had long been married off. Unfortunately, he did not return after escaping. Wuxia village was not big and was poorer than Gu village and Shangbei village. After the disaster, it was even poorer and there were not many people left in the village. When they saw Gu Yundong and the rest, they looked over curiously. It was only when they saw them going to the Bien family that they suddenly remembered. Wasn't he the child from the Bien family? The Bien family had long been in shambles. When they left previously, they had taken everything they could. Those that could not be taken away had probably been plundered long ago. However, looking at the familiar room and environment, Bien Yuanji was still very happy. After the joy, her heart ached. Her sister was gone and she would never come back. She did not know where her parents were or if they were still alive. Gu Yundong looked around and realized that there were some wood carvings in the corner. These were all made by her uncle. Eldest uncle used to be a carpenter. Unfortunately, he had only learned it for a short period of time, so he could only make some trinkets for a living. Gu Yundong took a piece of cloth from the carriage and laid it on the ground. She placed the small wooden carvings on it. Seeing this, Bien Yuanji also ran over to help. Now that he could eat and wear warm clothes, he felt much stronger. After packing the small wooden carvings, he carried them on his back. Unexpectedly, as soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw a few people surrounding him. A young-looking woman asked him, "Yuanji, is it you?" Bien Yuanji still remembered this person. She was the aunt next door. He immediately put down his things. "Aunt Li, it's me. I heard that you went to your grandpa's house. Why are you back?" The two villages were far apart, so Auntie Li really didn't know what kind of life he was living. Although she knew that his family and his grandfather's family did not have a good relationship, she did not expect it to be so bad. Bien Yuanji looked at Gu Yundong, then turned around and said, "I'm not at my grandpa's house anymore. I'm out. Auntie Li, I'm leaving. I might not come back in the future." Aunt Li was stunned. She looked at him, then at Gu Yundong and MDM Yang. She did not ask further. She just sighed and said, "No matter what, it's good to be alive. It's not easy to have a full meal these days. You're a good child. Take good care of yourself." Based on Bien Yuanji's current attire, he seemed to be doing well. He should be living a good life. Bien Yuanji nodded at Aunt Li with a smile. He now had a cousin and his aunt, Shu and Kiki. He was very good. Picking up the cloth bag on the ground, Bien Yuanji walked towards the carriage. Unexpectedly, halfway there, he suddenly saw someone walking over. As soon as Bien Yuanji saw that person, he recalled a bad memory. He turned around and ran towards Gu Yundong, holding her hand nervously. Only then did Gu Yundong look up at Madame Hu was walking over. Madame Hu was also surprised. She looked at Bien Yuanji and was speechless for a long time. Chapter 345. A little familiar upped by Boxn Zeroville. Siamikronim Madame Hu called out to him tentatively, "Yunji?" She couldn't be blamed for not being sure. It was mainly because Bien Yuanji was too different from what she had seen before. Who would have thought that in just 10 days, this person would become a completely different person? It seemed that he had indeed lived a good life. Madame Hu felt a little jealous. When Ding Jinsheng came back that day, she panicked when she didn't see Bien Yuanji. She thought that Ding Jinsheng had really sold him after getting him back from old Gus family. Wasn't he just out of the tiger's den and into the wolf's den? Wouldn't Bien Mulan look for him in the middle of the night? At that time, Madame Hu cried and asked Ding Jinsheng to bring him back. Unexpectedly, Ding Jinsheng said, "Didn't you dislike him? Then wouldn't it be good if I sent him to a family who wanted to adopt him?" Madame Hu almost went crazy with anger. "I don't like him, but what can I do? What if his sister comes to me in the middle of the night to take my life? Mother, Mulan just doesn't want Yuanji to suffer. Think about it, did she only ask you to let us take him away from the old Gu family?" Madame Hu actually didn't dare to recall the situation at that time. It was Father Ding who nodded and confirmed that Bien Mulan had indeed said that. However, Madame Hu was still afraid. Ding Jinsheng advised her, "That family is quite good and well off. Yuanji doesn't have to worry about food and clothing. It's much better than in our family. If Mulan finds out, not only will she not blame us, she will even thank us." Madame Hu was skeptical. Although it made sense, she still didn't dare to sleep that night. She waited all night with dark circles under her eyes and heaved a sigh of relief when she didn't see Bien Mulan and the black and white ghosts again. She fell onto the bed and slept for an entire day and night. When she woke up the next day, she heard that something had happened to old Gus family and that it was haunted. Jiameizi had also been hit on the head and fell into the water just like Madame Yang back then. At that time, she felt that Bien Mulan was taking revenge on old Gus family and was secretly happy. She secretly thought that the woman deserved it and started to laugh at her. However, something had been happening to old Gus' family. In just 10 days they had actually reached the point of killing each other and breaking their limbs. Madame Hu was a little afraid. She felt that Mulan seemed to be a little ruthless and especially vengeful. She was afraid that after Mulan finished dealing with old Gus' family, she would remember what Madame Hu had done wrong and look for her again. Therefore, Madame Hu set up a memorial tablet for Bien Mulan at home and burned a lot of paper money. In the end, she still felt uneasy. She actually dreamed of Bien Mulan's family in the middle of the night. She shivered and came to the Bien family the next day. She wanted to clean the house for the Bien family so that Bien Mulan could stay at her maternal home if she had nothing to do and wouldn't scare them again. He didn't expect to see Bien Yuanji here. Bien Yuanji still looked like he was living a good life. Madame Hu shifted her complicated gaze away from him and looked at Gu Yundong. Then she was stunned. This woman looked a little familiar. Miss, have we met before? Gu Yundong did not like Madame Hu. Initially she did not want to talk to her. Unexpectedly, Madame Hu remembered it herself. By the way, it's at Xingxing restaurant, right? You asked my Jincheng about something, right? Gu Yundong was a little surprised. He did not expect Madame Hu to have such a good memory at her age. Madame Hu was a little jealous. Her Jincheng knew such a rich family first, but she didn't expect Bien Yuanji to take advantage in the end. Gu Yundong nodded slightly and said to Bien Yuanji, "Let's go." Yeah. Madame Yang also held Bien Yuanzi's hand and said, "Don't be afraid. Dong Dong will protect you." Madame Hu was stunned. Why did this person's words sound? Chapter 346. That's Gu Dajiang's wife up by Box and Zeroville. Xiaomicron and Madame Hu watched as the three of them got into the carriage, but her brows furrowed slightly. It was only when their carriage disappeared into the distance that she came back to her senses. She strode towards Auntie Li's house and asked her, "Hey, do you know who the person with Yuanji is?" Auntie Li shook her head. How would I know? She didn't really want to bother with Madame Hu. Besides, she really didn't know. She had only said a few words to Yuanji. That girl looked very noble. How could a poor family like hers dare to look at the girl? Seeing that she could not find out anything, Madame Hu was a little angry. At this moment, she could not be bothered to go to the Bien house. She turned around and ran home. When she saw Ding Jincheng chopping firewood, she hurriedly pulled him over and asked him very seriously, "Tell me honestly, who exactly is the person who adopted Bien Yuanji?" Ding Jincheng was taken aback and his gaze drifted a little. "Didn't I say it already? It's just a kind-hearted family who pitted Yuanji. Don't lie to me." Madame Hu suddenly shook off his hand and said angrily, "I met them all today. Not only did I meet Bien Yuanji but I also met Gu Dajiang's wife." Yes, the woman who spoke like a child was Gu Dajiang's wife. Of course she recognized Madame Yang. It was just that the Madame Yang she saw today was too different from before. Not only had she gained weight, but her face had also become better and her clothes were neat. She didn't dare to look at her anymore. It was only when she heard Madame Yang's words that she suddenly connected the two of them. However, Madame Hu could not believe it no matter what. Still, along the way she was certain that it was Madame Yang, who was the woman holding Bien Yuanzi's hand. Ding Jincheng saw that his mother had seen them, so he did not hide it anymore. He pursed his lips and said, "That person is Yuanzi's cousin." "Cousin? She's eldest Uncle Gu Dajiang's daughter." Psst, Madame Hu's eyes widened. Gu Dajiang's daughter? Madame Yang's daughter? No wonder Madame Yang was also there. She frowned tightly. Gu Dajiang's daughter was back and she looked rich. She returned to Jianghu County, but she didn't show up. She didn't go back to Gu Village but only asked you to bring Bien Yuanji out? Ding Jincheng nodded. Yes, she knew that Bien Yuanji wasn't doing well. The Gu family didn't like him so she took him away. She doesn't live in Jianghu County? Ding Jincheng still nodded. Madame Hu lowered her head and thought for a moment. Suddenly she clapped her hands and smiled. Then she turned around and left. A bad premonition flashed across Ding Jincheng's mind. He suddenly pulled her back. "Mother, where are you going?" "Where am I going? I'll go to old Gus' house." Madame Hu gloated. "They extorted a tael of silver from me and tortured me. Do you see that? Old Gus' eldest granddaughter is so promising now. She clearly came back but she doesn't even enter the house. Isn't that hilarious? Mother? Hey, don't stop me. If old Gu finds out, he'll definitely regret it and die. I have to tell them that their rich granddaughter came back and took Bien Yuanji away without even looking at them." I want to laugh when I think of old Gus' face when he hears that. Madame Hu was extremely excited. She just wanted to see the world in chaos. She struggled free from Ding Jincheng and wanted to leave. Chapter 347. In Not Scaring You. TED by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronem, however, when Ding Jincheng heard her words, he broke out in cold sweat. He hugged her and dragged her back. Mother, mother, don't go. Not only did he drag Madame Hu back to the house, but he also locked the door. Madame Hu was furious and pinched his hand desperately. Why are you stopping me? Mother. Ding Jincheng pressed her down on the chair and said with a serious expression, if you want me to lose my limbs, go ahead. Madame Hu, who was about to hit him, paused and looked at him in surprise. What do you mean? Mother, have you forgotten what happened to old Gus' family recently? Ding Jincheng took a deep breath and lowered his voice. I suspect that the eldest daughter of the Gu family is behind old Gus' family's matters. Huh? Madame Hu's eyes widened as if she didn't believe it. Her? How is it possible for a girl who didn't even dare to speak loudly in the past to do that? I'm not scaring you, Ding Jincheng said. In the past she didn't dare to speak loudly, but now she does. Don't forget that at Xingxing restaurant that day, other than her, there was a man who looked powerful and influential. Now that the eldest daughter of the Gu family has a backer, she's more confident. The last time she saw me, her gaze was so terrifying that I was afraid of her. Madame Hu was stunned. There did seem to be a man. She thought of the Gu Yundong she had seen today. Her gaze was indeed a little scary. She slowly calmed down, but she still couldn't believe it. But didn't the second and third branches of old Gus' family fight between themselves? That's why I find it scary. Ding Jincheng did not expect them to be involved, but the last time he passed by Gu village and saw Ago, he found it strange. Bian Yuanji had already been sent back, so why would this person who had been with Gu Yundong appear? When he heard that something had happened to old Gus' family and that it was very tragic, he could not help but shiver. He did not even dare to go to the county city during this period of time. Mother, think about it. Why didn't anything happen to old Gus' family earlier or later? Why did something happen as soon as Yuanji left? Why did Gu Yundong stay in Jianghu County even though she had already rescued Bian Yuanji? Why did old Gus' family get into trouble and even Patriarch Gu became like that? These people all have a grudge against Gu Dajiang. As Ding Jincheng spoke, he couldn't help but swallow his saliva. I suspect that the Gu girl came back this time to take revenge. Gu Dajiang must have died. Perhaps his death is related to old Gus' family, so when she becomes capable, she comes to find trouble with old Gus' family. The man she followed is obviously powerful. Mother, let's not get involved with them. Otherwise we won't have a good life either. He had been thinking a lot these past few days. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. He even suspected that his parents' encounter with a ghost had something to do with her. Madame Hu was stunned when she heard this. However, when Ding Jincheng said that, his tone was scary, making one's hair stand on end. She glared at him. Then I won't go? Don't go. Madame Hu wanted to laugh at old Gus' family, but when she thought of the miserable state of old Gus' family, she decided to forget it. What if this woman realized that they were bad to Bian Mulan and Bian Yuanji? Gu Yundong did not know that Madame Hu had almost gone to Gu village to announce her return, but it did not matter even if she did. The Gu family was already in such a state. So what if they knew that she was the one who did it? Now Madame Shen would let her have a taste of losing her son. Madame Shen was overjoyed and her smile became brighter. Back then, when Gu Gang wanted to take me in as his concubine, I lied and said that I had lost my household registration certificate. In fact, I had been hiding it all along. When Gu Gang wanted to go to the government office to get me a new one, I thought of a way to delay it until now. Although I'm his concubine on the surface, I'm still a good citizen. Even if I escape, they can't do anything to me. Although the refugees had been back to their hometown for some time, because the two villages had merged, many household registrations were still unclear, so she was not an exception. Gu Yundong admired her. Then where do you plan to go? He'll just go home. MDM Shin sighed faintly. I remember you saying that your home is in a town on the other side of Feng County, right? Feng County is not close to here. It could even be said that it was far away. After leaving Jianghu County, they had to pass through the Yongning Prefecture. Why don't you wait for another day? We'll give you a ride. We have to pass by anyway. Chapter 349, A Favor You. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikranimimdim Shen was stunned for a moment before she lowered her eyes and thought about it. To be honest, she was indeed a little worried about traveling alone. Originally, she had planned to look for a caravan after bidding farewell to Gu Yundong and see if she could hitch a ride. It would be great if she could be with Gu Yundong. Hence, she nodded and agreed. Thank you. Then I'll take you to your room to rest. We'll leave early tomorrow morning. Yeah. Gu Yundong brought her to the room next door. That room was empty and just needed to be tidied up. When MDM Shen was working, Gu Yundong went out. Unexpectedly, as soon as she walked out of the courtyard, she saw Mao and the other three pushing each other towards her. Gu Yundong stopped in her tracks and glanced at them. The four of them immediately straightened their backs. However, their eyes did not stop rolling for a moment. Anyone could tell that they wanted to say something but hesitated. Gu Yundong entered the central room and said, "Do you have anything to say to me?" The four of them quickly walked in and looked at each other. After a while, Mao, who was the boss, said, Miss, we want to beg me for something." Beg me for something? Gu Yundong was surprised. Why did it sound so serious? She couldn't help but sit up straight. Go ahead. Well, miss, can you bring us back to the Xuanhe prefecture? Gu Yundong could not help but be stunned. She blurted out, Brother Xiao didn't say that he wanted to take you away? Brother Xiao? Xiao Qingyuan, who had just stepped through the door, suddenly stopped in his tracks. This was the first time he had heard her call him Brother Xiao. Why did it sound so nice? Xiao Qingyuan couldn't help but smile. He tried his best not to laugh out loud. He cleared his throat and strode into the central room. Gu Yundong turned her head and saw him. She looked at the spring breeze on his face in confusion. What happened? Why was he so happy? Xiao Qingyuan silently walked to a chair at the side and sat down. He picked up his teacup and drank his tea quietly. Continue chatting. He pretended that he didn't exist. She could continue to call him Brother Xiao. Gu Yundong felt that there was something strange about him. They were talking about him and he was present. How could they continue chatting? However, Mao could still continue. He said, Young Master Xiao said that it's up to you whether we stay or leave. Xiao Qingyuan nodded slightly. Gu Yundong was speechless. Didn't you bring them from the prefectural city? He had already ordered them around for so many days. Had he not decided if he wanted to take them away? Gu Yundong could not help but rub her forehead. He pointed outside and said, Go pack your things. Buy everything you need. Chapter 350, Follow-up of Gu Village U. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikran sitting in the carriage, Bien Yuanji looked very happy. He would be able to see Ashu and the others soon. Although he had yet to find his parents, his cousin was right. As long as he lived well, he would definitely be able to see them. MDM Shen was also sitting in the carriage. As she watched this place that had given her a painful experience get further and further away, her mood was unprecedentedly calm. Unfortunately, Gu Village was not peaceful at all. After Madame Wang found out that she had disappeared, she started to shout everywhere that she had eloped with someone and wanted to find her and drown her in the pond. It was a pity that Gu Gang was no longer the village chief. At most, he was only the patriarch of the Gu family in name. However, it was likely that he would not even be the patriarch soon. As the new chief of Gu Village, he did not react to Madame Wang's words at all. He even heard from the family living next door to Old Gus family that Madame Wang had tortured Madame Shen until she ran away, so he reprimanded Madame Wang fiercely. Only then did Madame Wang realize that her family really had no status in the village anymore. They were the kind that anyone could step on. She hated it to death, but who could she blame? In the end, no matter how she thought about it, it was all because of Gu Gang, who had to take a concubine despite being so old. Therefore, when she was taking care of Gu Gang, she became extremely impatient. Not only did she curse, but she also often starved him and kept him cold. Not long after, he became so thin that he was only skin and bones. He did not have any energy left. His son and daughter-in-law didn't care about him at all. They didn't even have enough time to look for Gu Wanbao, let alone care about such a useless person. However, Gu Gang's vitality was still very tenacious. He could not die, so he could only suffer. The Gu family, which was not far away from them, was not doing well either. The brothers had lost their arms or leg. Now he could not do any work and had to lie in bed every day to be served. To the two of them, what was the difference between them and trash? In the beginning, the two of them would still scold each other. Later on, when they ran out of strength, they would lie on the bed in a daze. Their willpower was especially low. Occasionally when their temper flared up, they would scold their children. After scolding their children they would scold their wives. After scolding their wives they would start scolding their parents. Not only had their families been tortured but they had also destroyed many things. The old Gu family, who had spent almost all their money to treat their injuries, was now extremely poor. Chapter 351. The Gu family's granddaughter returned you. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikron Jia Maisie could only continue to stay in old Gus' house. She was ordered around by Madame Zhao and scolded by Gu Dai. However, her children did not understand her and pushed all the blame to her. Madame Chang was still in a daze. She did not go out at all and rarely even left her room. Not only was she unable to take care of Gu Dahu, she even needed her daughter to take care of her. Madame Zhao was furious and deliberately starved her a few times. Madame Chang was so hungry that she couldn't take it anymore and came out, but she directly smashed the door of the main house to find food and almost fought with Madame Zhao. Madame Zhao almost fainted. She was also busy. Madame Chang could not take care of Gu Dahu, so she could only do it herself. There were many things to do at home. She was already so old but she still had to do it herself. It was the same for Gu Chuanzong. He did not have to go to the fields previously. Before escaping he had 4 sons. Even though Gu Dajiang worked as an accountant in the county and Gu Dai and Gu Dahu would occasionally slack off, he still had a diligent 4th son. After returning from the famine, he occasionally had to work in the fields, but he also had 2 sons. In order to have a good harvest, the 2 of them had to work. But now the 2nd and 3rd branches did not have any strong laborers. Gu Feier was not young anymore, but he used to rely on the fact that he was the eldest grandson and was always pampered. Even if he was a child from the countryside, he still lived a pampered life. Now he could not lift anything heavy. He could not stand such weather for an hour. The only person in old Gus' family who could work was Gu Chuanzong. Nowadays he went out early and returned late every day. He was so tired that he went home and fell asleep. Initially he thought that he would be able to enjoy life with so many sons. Now it was the complete opposite. He had to support 2 families. Gu Chuanzong was very regretful now. If he had known earlier he would have stopped 4th son from leaving the team to look for Gu Yundong and his mother. At least his youngest son would be filial to him. He sighed slowly and carried the hoe home. Unexpectedly, a familiar name suddenly sounded in her ear. Yes, Gu Dajiang's eldest daughter is very rich. Gu Chuanzong was stunned. Gu Dajiang? Eldest daughter? He looked up in confusion and turned to see Madame Hu chatting with someone under a tree not far away. He could not even lift his legs but he still walked over numbly. Madame Hu's back was facing him but her voice was not soft. That's Gu Yundong. I saw it with my own eyes. She's back with her silly mother. Do you know why we had to bring Bian Yuanji out? It was Gu Yundong who begged us. Chapter 352. Why doesn't she care about me? Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronim. The more Madame Hu spoke, the more excited she became. Bian Yuanji has already put on new clothes. In just a few days he's gained weight and his complexion has improved. After eating, a maidservant will wipe his mouth and make sure that his soup isn't too hot. He can buy whatever he wants. He can even throw away a stick of candied hawthorn just for fun. When she said this, even the children beside her came over and swallowed their saliva with sparkling eyes. Why would he throw it away? He can give it to me. Madame Hu glanced at the child who spoke. To you? When he was suffering here in the past, did you give him a grain of corn? Dream on. Everyone was extremely envious. If they had known that Bian Yuanji had such good fortune, they would have treated him better. One of the families in the crowd was stunned. When they thought of the bag of white rice that had suddenly appeared in their room a few days ago, their hearts pounded. They were the ones who took Bian Yuanji home for a meal when he was about to freeze to death. In that case, was he thanking them? However, old Gu, who was standing at the back of the crowd, became more and more shocked. His eyes lit up as he listened. His body, which had originally felt weak, suddenly erupted with a huge force. He pushed away the person in front of him and stood in front of Madame Hu in a few steps. She widened her eyes and asked, "Is what you said true? Is what you said true?" Madame Hu was so shocked that she almost fell off the standing stone. She barely managed to stabilize herself before she saw old Gus' weathered face clearly. She secretly pursed her lips and smiled. Of course it's true. Why would I lie to everyone? Then why didn't she come back? Why didn't she come home when she had money? Madame Hu laughed. Why do you think? Wasn't she afraid that your Gu family will cling onto her like blood-sucking insects? Old Gu, don't tell me you don't know what kind of life Gu Dajiang's family used to live? You bullied them in the past. Do you think they will come back and be filial to you? Do you think they're stupid? Let me tell you, she's smart. She secretly took Bien Yuanji away and didn't even look at you. But she's a member of old Gus family. She's my granddaughter. How can she leave us alone when she's rich? Old Gu was so angry that he was panting. The veins on the back of his hand were bulging, as if he could not accept this fact. The Gu family had already become like this. If Gu Yundong was really rich, why would he need to work so hard? His second and third sons could also go to a good medical center to treat their illnesses. They could also live in a big house with people serving them. Madame Hu sneered. You really dare to think about it? Your granddaughter is already married. The rich man is her husband. Why should he care about you? What about Gu Dajiang? What about Gu Yunxiu? My son and grandson. It would be unfilial of them to ignore me. Madame Hu smiled even more happily. I only saw Gu Dajiang's wife. As for Gu Dajiang and Gu Yunxiu, I didn't see them. Don't tell me these two are gone? Think about it, if they were still alive, would Gu Yundong not bring them here? She even brought Madame Yang with her when she went out. I don't think there's anyone else in the family who can take care of her. When everyone heard this, they all thought that it made sense. Madame Yang was a fool. It would be so troublesome to bring her out. If Gu Dajiang was around, she would definitely leave her at home for him to take care of. If Gu Yunxiu was around, Gu Yundong might as well bring him along instead of a fool. The daughter must have been worried without Madame Yang's close relatives by her side. Chapter 353, You Reap What You Sow You. TED by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronem. Old Gus' expression changed again and again. After a while he suddenly roared, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Tell me where they are. I'll go find her. As he spoke he came to pull Madame Hu. Madame Hu was pulled off a huge rock and lost her balance, spraining her ankle. She was in so much pain that her face contorted and she spoke without thinking. All right, go and find her. Let me tell you, it was Gu Yundong who caused your family to become like this. If you're not afraid of death, go and find her again and see if she'll take the lives of your two sons. Everyone was speechless. The entire venue was silent. Everyone gasped and looked at Madame Hu, unable to say a word. After a while, someone couldn't help but gulp and ask, Hu, what did you say just now? Madame Hu suddenly came back to her senses and cursed in her heart. Previously, she had really been persuaded by Ding Jincheng not to provoke Gu Yundong. However, when she heard that the ghost she had encountered that night might have been her doing, Madame Hu could no longer remain calm. She was so angry that she wanted to settle the score with Gu Yundong. However, when she thought of how miserable old Gus' family was, she was afraid. After delaying it for a few days, the more she thought about it, the angrier she became. The angrier she became, the more indignant she became. What should she do? In the end, she pushed the responsibility to old Gus' family. Wasn't this all old Gus' family's fault? If she could not find trouble with Gu Yundong, could she not cause trouble for old Gus' family? Madame Hu was quite shrewd. She saw that there had been no movement from old Gus' family recently, so Gu Gang's family was just like that. She also noticed that MDM Shen had escaped. When one thought too much, it would be easy for one to come up with conspiracy theories. Madame Hu felt that MDM Shen had been arranged by Gu Yundong from the beginning. After MDM Shen left, there was no movement from old Gus' family. Gu Yundong must have left Jianghu County. Therefore Madame Hu came to Gu Village. She deliberately came to provoke old Gus' family. But she only planned to say that Gu Yundong was living a good life because of her wealth. She did not intend to reveal her and Ding Jincheng's guesses. It was all old Gus' fault for letting her tongue slip. Madame Hu wanted to take back her words, but there were so many people around and they heard her clearly. When they regained their senses, they immediately grabbed her and asked, Are you telling the truth? Was it Gu Yundong who did everything to old Gus' family? But she didn't come to our Gu village, how did she do it? That's right. Gu Yundong was so timid in the past. How dare she do such a cruel thing? Seeing that she couldn't fool them anymore, Madame Hu decided to give up. That's right. Those things were done by the Gu girl. She didn't come to the Gu village, but didn't I say that girl is rich now? With money, are you afraid that she won't be able to find someone to help her? She was timid in the past. But don't you see how badly she was persecuted by old Gus' family? Her father and siblings are dead, and her mother was harmed by Jiameizi. How can she not hate her? So, this was all forced by old Gu. Madame Hu came to a conclusion. The Gu family reaped what they sowed. If they had treated Gu Yundong better in the past, wouldn't she have brought their family over to enjoy life now that she's rich? Just look at how Bian Yuanji is living now. Not far away, Madame Zhao also roughly heard it. Her expression immediately turned ferocious as she shouted, "That be asterisk tis, I'm going to sue her. She caused our family to be like this. I'm going to sue her." Madame Hu laughed out loud when she heard this. "Go ahead. Don't blame me for not reminding you. The man that the Gu girl married is not an ordinary person. One look and you can tell that he's powerful. Otherwise, how could he make all of you lose your arms and legs? If you sue him, you won't even be able to protect your grandson." Madame Zhao's face turned pale, but old Gu suddenly roared. He turned around and pounced at Madame Zhao, grabbing her and beating her up. Chapter 354, Dust Settled You. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronem. Everyone was stunned by this change, but old Gus's eyes were bloodshot as he hit Madame Zhao fiercely. "It's all your fault. It's all your fault, you old woman. If you hadn't treated Dajiang's family badly, we wouldn't have become like this. It's all your fault." He kept replaying what Madame Hu had just said in his mind. If he had treated them better in the past, he would have been taken away to enjoy life now. A stepmother is a stepmother. Your own son is spoiled like a piece of trash. Dajiang was your slave. You even abused Yuanji. You old woman, I'll beat you to death. Madame Zhao was about to go crazy. As she dodged, she shouted, "How can you blame me? You didn't even take your own son seriously and now you're blaming me. Gu Chuanzong, you're not a man. When we kicked their family out back then, it was clearly your idea. You're the most disgusting person." Madame Hu and the others watched from afar as they exposed each other and watched them fight each other. The Gu family was finished. Completely finished. Madame Hu pursed her lips and felt happy. She felt that she had said enough and left. Later on, she heard that old Gu and Madame Zhao were covered in injuries and had to lie in bed for a few days to recover. The Gu family was even more chaotic. Later on, Madame Zhao really complained to the village chief and wanted to arrest Gu Yundong. But the new village chief ignored her. Besides, she had no evidence and Gu Yundong was not around. Why should she be arrested? In any case, Madame Zhao did not dare to go to the county city to complain to the county magistrate. She could only go home gloomily. Old Gu had been regretting not treating Gu Dajiang's family well these days. He had gone to look for Madame Hu several times. When he went to her house, he cried bitterly. As he cried, he said that he missed his eldest son and his eldest granddaughter. He asked her where Gu Yundong was. How could Madame Hu know? She was so annoyed by him that she regretted it so much that she had acted rashly. In the end, Ding Jinsheng simply told him about the inn that Gu Yundong used to stay in. Anyway, he only knew about that inn. Old Gu went to look for her, but the waiter said that she had left long ago. Old Gu wanted to verify if that person was Gu Yundong, so he listened to the waiter describe how rich she was, how well she ate and how good she looked. It was as if he was stabbed in the heart. After he returned, he scolded Madame Zhao and the two of them fought again. Then he went to look for Madame Hu to cause trouble, claiming that it was her fault for not telling them earlier and causing the Ding family to be in trouble. The other members of the Gu family naturally heard about what happened to Gu Yundong. They were jealous and regretful at the same time. In the end, they became envious of Bian Yuanji. Old Gus's life was getting poorer and poorer, and everybody was in chaos every day. Old Gu thought about Gu Yundong all day long. He hoped that she would come back and take him away. Gu Yundong sneezed several times because of this. Xiao Qingyuan almost thought that she had caught a cold. The temperature difference between morning and night was indeed a little big. They were on the road, so there would be times when they didn't realize it. Gu Yundong felt that her family missed her, so she could not wait to go back. It took 3 days to travel from Jianghu County to Feng County, where the Shen family's home was located. Gu Yundong sent her all the way and took a slight detour to bring her directly to the town where her family lived. However, the closer she got to home, the more silent MDM Shen became. When she arrived at her destination, she sighed heavily and said in a low mood, "Thank you for your help along the way. We'll meet again if fate allows." After saying that, she looked at Madame Yang and Bian Yuanji before lifting the curtain and going down. However, in the next moment she suddenly retreated. Chapter 355. Can you bring me along? Ted by BX in Zeroville. Xiaomicron Gu Yundong was stunned. What's wrong? MDM Shen's expression changed slightly as she glanced outside the carriage curtain. Gu Yundong was puzzled. She peeked out and was stunned. Why was this person here? She let go and sat back down. She looked at MDM Shen, who was looking uncertain. What are you going to do? However, MDM Shen took a deep breath as if she had made up her mind. Her eyes lit up slightly and she became energetic. Actually, I've been holding a question in my heart for the past few days, Yundong, she said. Can I follow you to Xuanhe Prefecture and Yongfu Village? Gu Yundong was surprised. You're not going home? MDM Shen smiled bitterly. My parents are gone and I don't have any relatives at home. Actually, I've been hesitating. I thought that even if I went back, I would be alone. I felt very relaxed and comfortable spending time with you guys these few days. Especially when I heard you introduce Yongfu Village to Yuanji, I yearned for it very much. She was also a little reluctant to part with those rare friends. After spending a few days together, Gu Yundong, Xiao Qingyuan, Mao, and the others were all very clear about her past in the Gu village. They knew that she had become a concubine to an old man in his late 50s, but no one looked at her strangely, despised her, or distanced themselves from her. Sometimes she even felt that she was not clean. When she went back, she might just live a life in a daze, but deep down she still yearned for a beautiful life. I've been wondering if I should go home or find another place to start over. Now that I see Gu Wanbao here, I've made up my mind. That's right. When she lifted the curtain just now, she saw Gu Wanbao. No one expected that this person who had escaped from Gu village would actually come to the Shen family's hometown. However, looking at his sallow and haggard appearance, it was obvious that he was not doing well. Gu Yundong smiled. Since you've decided, let's go. Thanks a lot. No matter what, they had a deep friendship. Gu Yundong was very supportive of her decision. The carriage changed direction and headed out of town again. Gu Wanbao, who was squatting in the corner, only had time to squint at the back of the carriage before he sniffled and shrank back. Madame Shen's original name was Shen Sidian. Perhaps because the direction in her heart was finally clear, her smile could not help but become much brighter. The group went out of town. Shen Sidian first went to pay her respects to her parents' graves and told them about her decision to leave. Her parents' burial was arranged by the Gu family, so it was not strange for Gu Wanbao to know that her family was in this town. After bidding farewell to the Shen parents, the group of people moved much faster. They had a carriage, a mule cart, and a horse. Gu Yundong still liked to ride horses. Occasionally, when she was bored in the carriage, she would ride Gale, the horse brought by Xiao Qingyuan, for a while. Mao and his companions were extremely envious. There were a few times when they wanted to ask Xiao Qingyuan if they could ride it, but they were frightened by his sharp gaze and didn't dare to say a word. Other than Gu Yundong, no one else could touch the horse. The group of people walked steadily. Occasionally they would encounter people who were in the same direction as them. They kept a distance from each other and only nodded. Seeing that they were only a few days away from reaching Stinky Egg's village, Gu Yundong could not help but think of Bien Mulan's grave. As she rode her horse, she gradually slowed down and wondered if she should get into the carriage and have a good talk with Yuanji about this. At this moment, two carriages also came from the opposite side of the road. When they met, the horse under Gu Yundong was suddenly shocked. It suddenly roared and ran forward crazily. Chapter 356, Fear You. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Xiaomicron Ma. Gu Yundong screamed and hurriedly grabbed the reins of the horse. She tried her best to stabilize herself and try not to fall off. Xiao Qingyuan's expression changed drastically. He suddenly pulled the carriage and hurriedly instructed the people in the carriage, Miss Shen, take good care of them. As he spoke, he took out his dagger and cut off the reins. He mounted Wind Chaser and chased after him desperately. Shen Sidian only had time to hug Madame Yang and Bien Yuanji. When she stuck her head out again, she could barely see Xiao Qingyuan's disappearing back. Be careful. She could only shout. Then she turned around to comfort the panicked Madame Yang. Although Gu Yundong was very familiar with riding horses, she still could not deal with such a crazy horse that seemed to have been provoked. She could only hold the reins tightly and try her best to stabilize herself so that she would not fall. It was fine if she fell down here, but she was afraid that she would be trampled to death by the horse before she could get up. Gale, calm down. She tried to calm it down, but at this moment, Gale could not realize who was on her back. It could not even tell the direction anymore and began to run into the forest. Gu Yundong hurriedly lowered her body to prevent the branches from scratching his face and eyes. However, she was anxious. The horse did not slow down at all. Yundong. A familiar voice came from behind. Gu Yundong knew that it was Xiao Qingyuan. She knew that this person would definitely not abandon her, but she could not turn around to look. Fortunately, Xiao Qingyuan rode Wind Chaser that was not agitated. Moreover, he had been with Gu Yundong for a long time and clearly realized that she was in danger. He quickly caught up with her. The path in the forest was not easy to take. After Gale was blocked by the trees twice, it finally slowed down a little. Wind Chaser took the opportunity to run forward, and the distance between the two horses slowly shortened. Xiao Qingyuan controlled Wind Chaser to block Gale and reached out to Gu Yundong. "Give me your hand. I'll pull you over." The horse was still running, but Gu Yundong was much more relaxed when she saw him. She held the reins with one hand and handed the other to Xiao Qingyuan. Taking advantage of the moment when the two horses approached, she suddenly exerted strength and pounced towards him. Xiao Qingyuan exerted strength and carried her over. Now that there was no one on the back of Gale, it quickly rushed forward again. Xiao Qingyuan could no longer care about it. He only hugged Gu Yundong tightly and calmed his wildly beating heart before slowly stopping. Gu Yundong was also panting heavily. She hugged his waist and gradually regained her senses. After a while she retreated slightly. However, halfway through, the hand on her waist suddenly tightened and she was pressed back down. Her ears were filled with the sound of a certain someone's heartbeat. "Let's wait a little longer." His voice with lingering fear came from above. Gu Yundong paused and did not move. After a long time, she heard Xiao Qingyuan's slightly hoarse voice. "I almost thought that I wouldn't be able to save you in time." Her voice was still trembling. Gu Yundong was in a daze. She did not expect him to be so afraid. She reached out to pat his back, but as soon as she opened her palm, she could not help but gasp. Xiao Qingyuan was stunned and quickly let go of her. Only then did he see that her hands were already covered in blood from the reins. He was instantly vexed. Gu Yundong comforted him instead. "It's all right. There's a first aid kit in the carriage. They'll be fine after applying some medicine." "Let's go back now," Xiao Qingyuan said as he turned his horse around. Gu Yundong thought of Gale that had disappeared into the forest. "What about the horse?" "Ignore it." Xiao Qingyuan's voice was extremely cold. Chapter 357, He'll give you money as compensation you. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronim Xiao Qingyuan still hugged her tightly and rode back with her. They had already run a long way. Madame Yang and the others were probably worried to death. Xiao Qingyuan thought that the injury on her hand needed to be treated properly and couldn't help but speed up. However, when they saw where the carriage was parked from afar, their faces could not help but darken. Mao and the others were either holding their stomachs or hands and feet as they fell to the ground, groaning in pain. Shen Sidian protected Madame Yang and Bian Yuanji as she stood beside the carriage and looked at the people opposite her warily. There were 7 people standing in front of them. One was a middle-aged man dressed in riches who looked like the master. The other was a boy in his early teens. There were 2 tall men who looked like guards. There were also 2 coachmen and a maidservant. There were also 2 carriages behind them. This group of people was the ones who had brushed past them at that time. Xiao Qingyuan rode his horse forward. When Mao and the other 3 saw them, their eyes lit up. They couldn't care less about the pain on their bodies. They stood up and staggered over. "Young master, miss, it's him. It's that kid who blew an arrow at Gale's butt. That's why Gale suddenly ran crazily. We wanted to stop them but we couldn't beat him." He pointed at the boy in his early teens. Xiao Qingyuan's sharp gaze suddenly shot towards him. The child was a little afraid when he met his gaze. However, he quickly thought of the 2 guards on his side. The 4 people who wanted to stop them just now had been beaten until their butts were swollen. What was there to be afraid of? Therefore, the boy raised his chin and snorted. "So what if it's me?" He was still playing with a small blowpipe in his hand. "I just wanted to see if that horse is a good horse. I heard that even if a smart horse has a knife cut into its body, it will consider the owner on its back and endure the pain. It seems that your horse can't do it." Before he could finish speaking, his head was hit hard. He looked up and glared at the middle-aged man. "Father, why did you hit me?" The man didn't look at him. He only cupped his hands at Xiao Qingyuan and said with a smile, "I'm really sorry. I didn't teach my son well." This girl was frightened. Fortunately, she's safe and sound. "Race 20 taels of silver. Take it as a compensation for you." He took out a banknote and handed it over. Xiao Qingyuan did not even look at it. He just bent down and entered the carriage. He took out the first aid kit and lowered his head to carefully treat the wound on Gu Yundong's palm. Madame Yang and the others exclaimed and hurriedly ran forward. Dong Dong, are you bleeding? Chapter 358, So Handsome That I Want to Scream You. Ted by BX in Zeroville. Siamikronim he pushed the guard away and raised his chin high. He looked at Xiao Qingyuan with disdain. What? Do you want to hit me? Our Ahai and Ah Feng are experts. Look at your 4 servants. They wanted to attack just now but they were beaten until they cried for their parents. It's extremely embarrassing. Ah Mao and the other 3 trembled in anger but what he said was the truth. Even if they were tied up together they would not be able to defeat the 2 guards. Xiao Qingyuan looked down at the child and suddenly grabbed his wrist, dragging him to the side. Ah! The child was shocked and screamed. The expression of the guard standing beside him, Ahai, changed drastically. He raised his hand and was about to hit Xiao Qingyuan. With a swoosh an arrow suddenly shot over. Ahai subconsciously dodged to the side, but the arrow brushed past his shoulder, leaving a trail of blood. Finally, it nailed heavily to the ground. Ahai looked up in shock and saw that Gu Yundong, whom they had ignored earlier, was sitting on the shaft of the carriage. She was holding an exquisite crossbow in her hand and was squinting in his direction. However, Gu Yundong shook her hand slightly. It was all Xiao Qingyuan's fault for wrapping her hand like a dumpling. Her agility was greatly reduced and she almost missed. She looked at Ahai and smiled. Don't move. Ahai only paused for a moment, but Xiao Qingyuan threw the child and his hand onto the horse beside him and whipped the horse's butt. The horse neighed and ran forward in pain. Help, father, help me. The middle-aged man was stunned by this sudden change. He suddenly came back to his senses. Aren't you going to save young master? Ah Feng, who was standing beside him, hurriedly jumped onto the other horse and chased after him as fast as lightning. Ah Mao and the others looked at Xiao Qingyuan and Gu Yundong with starry eyes. What? They were so handsome and tacit. Their followers wanted to scream. The middle-aged man was furious. He pointed at Xiao Qingyuan with a trembling finger. You! His face flushed red as he suddenly shouted, Ahai! Ahai quickly attacked Xiao Qingyuan. He was a professional guard. Although Xiao Qingyuan also had skills, he was not a professional. Most of his skills were from fighting various prey on the mountain. The escorts in the agency had also taught him. Therefore at first Xiao Qingyuan was at a slight disadvantage, but after he became familiar with it, Ahai found it a little difficult. In particular, he had been injured previously. Although it was just a superficial wound, his aura was already weak. The middle-aged man was a little flustered and exasperated when he saw this. He asked the 2 coachmen to go forward and help. There was no need for Gu Yundong to speak. Ah Mao and the rest, who were slowly recovering, rushed forward and started punching and kicking the 2 coachmen. If they could not defeat the guards, couldn't the 4 of them deal with 2 coachmen? They had also been in the gangs and fought for territory. Who didn't know how to fight? On the other hand, the only maidservant present was smart. She looked around and saw Madame Yang and the others standing not far away to watch the commotion, so she wanted to sneak over. But she had just taken a step when Gu Yundong aimed her crossbow at her. She raised her eyebrows and smiled. Come here. The maidservant shuddered and her hands trembled. She quickly lowered her head and pretended that she did not exist. The middle-aged man's face finally turned pale. He regretted it. He should have left quickly before the 2 of them returned. Oh! Finally, the knife in Ahai's hand was struck down by Xiao Qingyuan, and he was sent flying. When Go saw this, he immediately pounced over. He picked up the rope and tied the man up. He could not help but hit the man's head. Who told you to kick my stomach? Chapter 359, Gu Concubine utted by Bexenville. Siamikronem, the middle-aged man's face was ashen. He glared at Xiao Qingyuan and said, Do you know who I am? Then do you know who we are? Gu Yundong jumped down from the shaft of the carriage, looking insufferably arrogant. Do you know who I am? Who wouldn't say that? The middle-aged man was stunned. He took a closer look at Gu Yundong and the rest. They were dressed very commonly and did not look like people with power and influence. However, the aura of these 2 people made people feel that they could not be underestimated. They were so confident. Could it be that their backer was also very powerful? The middle-aged man's surname was Zhou. He was originally a wealthy businessman in Qingan Prefecture. Later on, when Qingan Prefecture was in chaos, his business plummeted. Also, his backer was transferred to Xuanhe Prefecture, so he simply moved his entire family to Xuanhe Prefecture. Their current location belonged to the Qingan Prefecture. Other than some close friends, his backer was really not here. Could it be that these people had someone backing them up in Qingan Prefecture? Zhou Dufu pondered in his heart and became a little uncertain. At this moment, Ah Feng rode his horse and brought back Zhou Xiaojun, who had almost fainted from crying. The child was indeed saved, but he was frightened. As soon as he was carried off the horse, his legs went limp and he fell to the ground. Ah Feng looked at Ah Hai, the coachman, and the others who were tied up. His expression immediately changed and he was about to draw his saber. Gu Yundong had somehow gotten into the carriage behind Zhou Dufu. A dagger was pressed against his neck as he glanced at Ah Feng. The latter immediately stopped and was tied up by Ah Mao. Zhou Dufu stared at the dagger on his neck and trembled in fear. He finally realized that he had become meat on the chopping board. His voice immediately softened. Guys, let's talk things out. This matter is indeed our family's fault. We will apologize and compensate the two of you. Can you give us a price? Gu Yundong raised his eyebrows. Zhou Dufu sensed the change in her attitude and hurriedly said, Look, my son did go overboard and did something wrong, but you've also taken revenge. Look, he's so scared that he can't speak. We're even now, right? Everyone looked at Zhou Xiaojun, who was covered in sweat. This child in his early teens had probably never experienced such a life-and-death situation. He was so frightened that his face turned pale and his hands and feet trembled. The lesson was indeed quite ruthless. But Gu Yundong did not regret it at all. He had asked for it. If she had not been calm enough, if Xiao Qingyuan had not risked everything to save her, she would have been thrown off the horse and trampled to death. Chapter 360, Going to your place to propose uttered by Bexenville. Siamakronemu, Zhou Xiaojun sneered. I don't know what you like about that Gu woman. She's already so old and has even given birth to a child. If you want to take a concubine, go find a virgin girl. Why would you treat an old woman like a treasure? Zhou Dufu glared at him. What do you know? Your Aunt Gu had a hard time in the past. It's rare for her to enjoy life, so why can't you stop going against her? Your mother is so jealous. She's not virtuous at all. Why don't you say that you're a pig? Zhou Xiaojun wiped his face fiercely and climbed into the carriage himself. However, his hands and feet were still weak. It took a while for the maidservant to help him up. Zhou Dufu was so angry that his hands trembled. Who would say that about their father? This child was simply an unfilial son. He had lost so much money and was very unhappy, and he could not control his son. He hated his wife even more because she had spoiled their son. Gu Yundong and the rest had already walked far away. In the end, Xiao Qingyuan rode Wind Chaser into the forest to bring out Gale that had calmed down. Sure enough, there was a small arrow stuck in Gale's back. When Ago saw this, he quickly volunteered, I'll do it. My father used to be a veterinarian. Everyone was speechless. Your father was actually a veterinarian? Amao was even more surprised. Your father was a veterinarian, but you don't know how to ride a mule cart? It took them a long time to get used to it. Ago was dumbfounded. Why does the vet's son have to know how to ride a mule cart? Isn't that the job of a driver? Ichem? You make a lot of sense. Gu Yundong only pulled out the arrow from Gale's body and applied medicine to the wound when they arrived at a nearby village. After this incident, Gu Yundong remained in the carriage. Coincidentally, Madame Yang was also worried and did not allow her to go out. Gu Yundong looked at her hands that were wrapped up like dumplings and felt very helpless. At night, they stayed at an inn in town. After settling down, Gu Yundong finally had the time to ask Amao and the others, How much money did you get? The four of them looked at each other and chuckled. Each of them took out a banknote worth 100 taels of silver. They were so excited that their bodies were trembling. 100 taels. Is that all you've got? You only asked for 100 taels? Isn't 100 taels a lot? Gu Yundong was stunned. 100 taels of silver. Now that she had a workshop that could earn money, 100 taels of silver did not seem like much. But when she first came to this world, she even had to calculate every one tael of silver carefully. 100 taels of silver was enough to build her green brick-tiled house. Chapter 361. Be more reserved uttered by Bexenville. Siamakronem Gu Yundong? Gu Yundong? She whipped her head around and looked at him in shock, wondering if Shed heard him correctly. What did you just say? Could it be that she was too sleepy and was hallucinating? Xiao Qingyuan repeated, after we go back, I'll find someone to propose marriage. What do you think of Aunt Zhang? Our families are familiar with her and we live next to each other. If there's anything we don't know, she'll remind us. Gu Yundong was sure that she did not hear wrongly this time, but she still looked stunned. After a long pause, she slowly turned around and sat opposite him. Gu Yundong's throat was a little dry. She picked up the cup and wanted to drink some water. Only then did she realize that Xiao Qingyuan seemed to have finished the water in the cup. She looked up into his twinkling eyes and realized that he was even more nervous than she was. Seriously, silence. Silence. The two of them just sat there without saying anything. They didn't know what to say. Gu Yundong's mind was still a little blank. She could not understand why he suddenly proposed. This was a proposal, right? No, he didn't even ask for anything. He made the decision directly. At the thought of this, Gu Yundong's mind instantly cleared up. She widened her eyes and glared at the man opposite her. Why are you suddenly going to my house to propose marriage? It's not really sudden. Didn't we hug this morning? It was quite long. Xiao Qingyuan lowered his head, but the tips of his ears turned inexplicably red. Gu Yundong was speechless. What? They hugged? You're going to my house to propose marriage because you've hugged me and you're taking responsibility for me? Xiao Qingyuan knew that she had misunderstood. He immediately looked up and shook his head with a serious expression. Of course not. I originally wanted to wait until you reached adulthood, but since you've already hugged me, I can only bring it forward. He said it as if he had no choice, but the corners of his lips kept curling up. Gu Yundong could not help but raise her leg and kick him. What do you mean you'll go when I'm of marriageable age? Did I agree? You can go just like that? Unexpectedly, Xiao Qingyuan did not guard against this kick and fell back. Gu Yundong subconsciously reached out to pull him. The next moment, both of them fell to the ground. Xiao Qingyuan was fast. When he fell, he turned his body slightly so that Gu Yundong would fall on him and not get hurt at all. Then he looked up and asked uncertainly, "You don't agree?" There was actually a trace of grievance in his words. Gu Yundong was so angry that she laughed. How can you propose marriage without confirming the relationship first? Then shall we confirm it now? Chapter 363, The Gap Between People Uttered by Bexenville. Xiaomicronem Gu Yundong's eyes widened. Was this for real? She quickly leaned over to take a look. You've really seen it before? Xiao Qingyuan nodded and turned another page. I've seen this too. He turned another 2 pages. I seem to have seen this too. Gu Yundong was speechless. Didn't Song Dajiang, this liar, say that these were precious and rare herbs? No, maybe he remembered wrongly? After all, there were many similar herbs. She asked in detail, Are you sure? Is it possible that you saw it wrongly? Where did you see it? The environment and habits are written on it. I should be right. I saw it in the mountains. If you want it, I'll pick it for you another day. Xiao Qingyuan could already recognize a lot of words now. He was a fast learner in this aspect. Deep in the mountains? That's right, the deep mountain behind Yongfu village stretched for thousands of miles, but most of the villagers in the surrounding villages were active at the foot of the mountain, picking some wild vegetables, mushrooms, and firewood. Even the hunters were mostly hunting in the periphery. There were very few people who entered the deep mountains. However, Xiao Qingyuan had been there more than once. No one had destroyed or picked them in the deep mountains, so there were definitely many good things. It was not strange for him to see these precious herbs. Gu Yundong's eyes lit up. Was it possible that Bai Muzi, the one her mother needed to treat illnesses, could be found there? She quickly flipped to Bai Muzi's page. Have you seen this before? Xiao Qingyuan read it carefully and shook his head regretfully. I've never seen it before. If I see it again, I'll bring it back for you. Then take a second look and remember what it looks like in case you forget it when the time comes. Xiao Qingyuan smiled and said, No need. I'll remember it. Already? It's not just that. I've memorized everything I saw earlier. Don't worry. Gu Yundong was speechless. Didn't you just read it once? Are you sure you're not lying to me? She glanced at him suspiciously and flipped open one of the pages, covering the words on it. She pointed at the picture and asked, What's this? Xiao Qingyuan only glanced at it and quickly explained the characteristics of the herbs. Gu Yundong stole a glance and found that every word was exactly the same. Was there such a huge difference between people? Gu Yundong was a little indignant. What? She had memorized it seriously. How could she forget it so easily? Xiao Qingyuan seemed to have seen that she had suffered a blow. He quickly said, "Actually, I've already forgotten about it." Hee. There was no sincerity in lying. She threw the book at him. "Since you have such a good memory, take a good look at this book." Chapter 364. Arriving at Fengkai County utted by Bexenville. Xiaomicronem. As soon as Bian Yuanji walked closer, tears streamed down his face. He subconsciously knelt on the ground and sobbed, but he tried his best to suppress his voice. Gu Yundong led Madame Yang to the side, leaving him to talk to Bian Mulan in private. "Sister, I'm here to see you. Don't worry, I'm doing very well now. Although Grandpa and second uncle don't like me, you're right. We still have first uncle and fourth uncle. I'm going to first uncle's house now. My cousin said that they're my family. In the future I won't be alone. I'll live well. I just miss you. If only Big Sis was here too." As he spoke, he couldn't help but wipe his tears. "I haven't found father and mother yet, but I know that they're definitely still alive. I'll definitely be able to see them. We're here today to move your grave. They'll bring you along to first uncle's village. In the future, when we reunite with father, mother, first uncle and fourth uncle, you'll be able to see us. You won't be alone here. In the future, I'll visit you every year. Big Sis." He finally broke down in tears. "Have a safe journey." He bent down and kowtowed heavily. It had been half a year. His elder sister had been gone for half a year, but Bian Yuanji still felt as if it was yesterday. Now, when he thought of Bian Mulan's voice and smile, he still felt as if his heart was being pricked by needles. Such a good sister was gone just like that. She was so young and had never enjoyed life. She had never had a child and had died at the most beautiful age. Her parents had not even seen her for the last time. Bian Yuanji pressed his forehead against the ground, but his heart was filled with bitterness. Finally he couldn't help but cry out loud. His childish voice was filled with reluctance and despair. Madame Yang, who was not far away, could not help but lean on Gu Yundong's shoulder and whimper. Gu Yundong patted her soundlessly. After a long while, he walked forward and helped Bian Yuanji up, whose face was red from crying and he could barely breathe. As soon as the little thing stood up, his legs went weak and he fell to the ground uncontrollably. Xiao Qingyuan came over to carry him down the mountain. After he left, Gu Yundong asked the villagers to help. With a sound, lift the coffin. Bian Mulan finally left the wilderness and prepared to return to her roots. Gu Yundong placed the cremated ashes into an urn and carefully wrapped them in cloth before handing them to Bian Yuanji. Bian Yuanji hugged her tightly and cried for a while before thanking her solemnly with red eyes. With Bian Mulan's matter settled, Gu Yundong did not stay any longer. After bidding farewell to Stinky Egg and his family, she set off on her return journey. In the end you saw it, Miss Gu. Not only did you scold them badly, but that teacher also fainted from anger. Gu Yundong blinked. Why did Luanna's words make her sound so cruel? Not only her, but Mao, Shinsidian, and Bian Yuanji also looked at her in shock. It turns out that not only are you good at fighting, but you are also good at talking. You could actually make someone faint? And the other party was a master who had read a lot of books? What exactly did you say? Gu Yundong coughed lightly and said sternly, I couldn't bear to see them bullying the weak with numbers, so I was fighting for justice. What's with your gazes? Everyone nodded. I believe you. Gu Yundong was speechless. She turned her head and glared at Luan. She asked in an unfriendly tone, then what happened to Dongyi Academy? Could it be that they went to Teacher Qin's academy again? Not really. That you're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.